Наші Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 466 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again on a very legendary fundraiser night.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And the news could have never been better, because while we're running our Sunday fundraiser tonight, there have been reports coming out from pro-Russian, I guess you could say, propagandists and bloggers that the Ukrainians have begun a breakthrough in the Zaporizhzhia oblast that is pretty much not being stopped at all at this moment. And it is supposed that the counteroffensive is now underway. Of course, that is amazing news, and we'll hopefully be seeing developments on that over the next few days. But speaking of a massive development, many of y'all know what tonight is about, and the fundraiser is specifically titled about what tonight's fundraiser is. It is the fundraiser where we are going to reach $1 million raised over the course of this channel's history over all of our fundraisers. It is going to be an amazing night, especially considering that if I go and pull up my stream again, because it doesn't show us that in the control room anymore, so let me go and grab the stream again. Right here real quick. Y'all won't be able to see that on screen, but let's see here. Let me go over here and pause that, and we are already up to $6,000 raised on tonight's fundraiser. An amazing number. And not only that, it's for an amazing nonprofit. Also, really quickly, I would like to apologize. Oh my God, Steve!
Dang.
Steve! Sam, what you doing with that hot dog? But anyways, let me get off of that real quick, because tonight's fundraiser is for Razom for Ukraine. Razom for Ukraine is an incredible nonprofit that we have been supporting for an incredibly long time, along with many others that we've been supporting. Razom is one of our favorites, next to Doctors Without Borders, which honestly is my favorite nonprofit to support, because they are a nonprofit that is based in Ukraine, and they undertake massive amounts of projects to help out inside of the nation of Ukraine. They do everything from providing medical equipment and gear, to paying for life-saving surgeries, to providing scholarships for Ukrainian soldiers to get a proper education after the war and to be able to pick up a skilled trade or even get a white-collar job. They are an amazing nonprofit, and I thought that considering that every other time we've tried to reach some kind of a landmark number, we have always fundraised for Doctors Without Borders, tonight we were going to do it a little bit different and do it for Razom for Ukraine. Of course, it is an amazing nonprofit, and I've already put in my $100 of the night to support this fundraiser, and I hope you all join the rest of the LSA in reaching this amazing $1 million goal. The fundraiser goal is $22,638, and based off of where we started tonight over the totals raised for all of our fundraisers, that is the exact figure, literally down to the dollar, for what we will need to raise tonight. Oh my God.
Whoa, what
An
the hell? Where'd
anonymous
that come
donation
from?
of $12,000, and we're already at
Damn,
$16,078. Oh my God. We all know, I bet you we all know who the anonymous viewer was. It probably was Mark. I would put money on it.
Was it Mark? Was it?
It may have been. It may have been Mark, but we don't
Mark
know.
fess
Because
up.
Mark, you gotta confess. You gotta confess. But anyways, with that,
16,000 already. That is insane.
16,000 in 16 minutes. We've raised $1,000 a minute at this point. Unbelievable. But anyways, moving on from that amazing bombshell, which we will be revisiting later on, we have to get into the news. And I'd also like to apologize to y'all about something that y'all may be hearing in the background, because I haven't been able to get to this yet. I may sound a little sick tonight, because I kind of am. I think I'm having some really, really bad allergies today. And so if I sound sick, that's kind of the reason why. And I just want to put that out there in advance so that way everyone's like, man, he sounds weird tonight. I kind of do. I'm not going to lie. But with that, it is now time for us to get into the news. But shh, I know that we're talking about the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the title beginning, and we have heard reports that it has in fact begun. But in the sake of operational security, we're actually not going to be covering that all too much tonight at all, considering that it just started, from what we can understand, around 8 hours ago. So it's a very young counteroffensive, so even really saying anything about it at all could be an operational security risk that could put people's lives in jeopardy here in the Zaporizhzhia oblast. But one thing that we do know is that while that appears to be the primary counteroffensive, at least from what Russian bloggers are stating with how badly the front lines are doing in that area and how quickly it's collapsing, the front lines inside of Russia itself are starting to collapse at a rapid rate. In fact, we've seen that they have captured an area that was far larger than any other amount of territory that the Freedom of Russia Legion and the RDK have captured before in any other border raid or border incursion. And it's amazing because it appears that the Russians are now having to fight a defensive battle inside of their own country. I'll actually be showing y'all the only map that we have gotten, which appears to be mostly accurate about what the Freedom of Russia Legion and the RDK have been able to take in terms of ground, and this is the map that we got today. Once again, it could be slightly inaccurate, so keep that in mind, but this is really the only map that we have to work off of at this moment, and we can see the entire area that we're now going to call the Russian Liberation Army, which we're going to call from here forward the combined forces of the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps. We're just going to combine them into two and call them the Russian Liberation Army. This is what they have been able to take. So the white area, from what we believe, represents no man's land. The green area represents areas that we can confirm the Freedom of Russia, the Russian Liberation Army holds at this moment. And then the red areas, of course, are the areas that the Russian Federation still directly controls. But as we can see, the area of no man's land where the Russians... Oh my God! We hit goal! Let's go!
Let's go!
Oh my God! I cannot believe it! We did it! I can't believe it! We've already done it!
We hit $1 million.
Oh my God! This is unbelievable! In 19 minutes, we have passed $1 million! I can't believe it! This is absolutely incredible. It's a great night. It's an amazing night. We've already raised $26,094 for Razom for Ukraine, and we passed $1 million by nearly $3,000. Let's go! LSA! 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 Man, I'm telling you, this is the kind of stuff I live for right here. I don't even know if y'all can hear me right now because we've got a $1 million victory card playing literally 20 minutes into the stream, and we've done it. I can't believe it. Oh my God. Absolutely insane. Oh my God. That is crazy.
Razom's going to get one of those big publishers clearinghouse checks.
They're going to be getting one of those ones made out of the giant cardboard thing. Yeah. Oh my God. I can't believe it. I can't believe this at all. Good God. This is truly incredible. I have to admit. Amazing.
Channel history in the making.
That is channel history right there. We just finally passed over 466 days of the war, $1 million raised in support of Ukraine. Oh my God.
I can't believe it. The moment is here.
It's finally happened. This has been 466 days in the making right here. And the 4,300 of y'all that are on the stream right now have just witnessed this channel make history. For this channel and for the whole of YouTube. It is unbelievable to think that every single one of y'all here in the Lee Spring Army, the thousands of y'all who are here right now, and the hundreds of thousands of y'all who follow this channel have helped us to get to this point tonight. It is unbelievable. We are currently sitting at nearly $27,000 raised in support of Razom for Ukraine, and I have to remind everyone again that our goal tonight was $22,638. That is the exact amount that the Lee Spring Army would need to pass $1 million. We just passed that in 20 minutes. We are now over $1 million. We are at $1,004,000 raised in support of Ukraine at this point. I have to thank every single one of y'all who has been on this journey with us as we've covered the news of this war and run these fundraisers over the entirety of the war, 466 days, for being here with us tonight and watching history happen. I, of course, have to thank, of course, Mark, General of the LSA, who deserves the rank of Field Marshal of the Lee Spring Army for achieving such a massive victory tonight. And, of course, I've got to thank everyone else who is in this Lee Spring Army that has helped these fundraisers to get to where they are. It is unbelievable to think that we're here tonight, having passed $1 million on this channel, raised throughout all of the fundraisers that we've ever run. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all once again for reaching this point. I would have never thought in the history of my life, Matthew, that we would have actually raised, as this channel, as a combined Lee Spring Army, $1 million for Ukraine. That is unbelievable. Actually, I can't even really wrap my head around it.
I gotta admit that when we were raising like 100,000, that felt like a tremendous sum, and it was. I would have never guessed in a million years we'd have hit $1 million for charity. That is honestly beyond my wildest dreams on that. And I'm incredibly impressed to see it.
And I gotta tell y'all, it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And I know that many of y'all are here for the news tonight, but y'all just watched the news happen right there in the live chat. That is news right there. There's been no other channel on YouTube that has run fundraisers through YouTube Give in support of Ukraine that has passed $1 million combined over all of them. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So from this point forward, whenever we quote our fundraiser total, it's now in the 7 digits. It's no longer in the 6 digits. It's now in the 7 digits. And so now we're moving on into uncharted waters. I actually never thought that this channel would pass $1 million raised in support. That always seemed like an impossible goal to get to that point. And now we've gotten there. And to be honest with you, I'm like, what do we do now? Because, like the next goal, what is it, like 10 million? I mean, that is huge. And honestly, that would be wild to reach, but one thing that I know is that the Lee Spring Army is truly the greatest group, the greatest community on YouTube. And it's unbelievable to think that that all of y'all have been able to do this tonight, and the credit goes entirely to Lee Spring Army. Y'all are an amazing group of folks, an incredibly kind group, an unbelievably kind group, and I just can't believe it. And of course, in celebration of $1 million raised, we will be having a week of festivities next week. We'll continue on our normal news coverage, but we're going to be trying to come up with a whole bunch of cool stuff in celebration of $1 million raised over the history of this channel. We will be having a limited edition merch run, where, of course, we have $1 million raised on the shirts. Of course, that will go to support the channel. And also, we will be probably doing live podcasts as well. We won't be doing them every single day over this next week, but we will be doing them several days in celebration of what we've been able to do tonight. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all once again. I honestly think that for the rest of the night, I'm going to be thanking all of y'all for making that possible. And it's unbelievable to think we've finally done it. We've all finally done it all together. $1 million. It's unbelievable. And
Crazy. It is insane that we've reached it. And Mark said that the next goal is, no, let's invade Moscow.
We just forget the monetary goals. We just go for winning the war. But honestly, with the Lee Spring Army being able to reach $1 million, I honestly think that this community could go over there and just win the war tomorrow. But with that, let me get back to the news real quick. I almost am getting emotional over here because I never thought that this channel would be able to do something like this. But anyways, getting back to the news, we saw that this is the area that the Russian Liberation Army has been able to control in the area of Belgorod. Everything in green is something they control, everything in white is no man's land, and everything in red is Russian-held territory. And it is unbelievable to think that they've made this kind of progress, and they are now beginning a battle inside of the outskirts of Shebekino, which we've been seeing occur today. Of course, we don't have the exact up-to-date information about where the Russian Liberation Army is. We do know, however, that they have most likely taken control of Shebekino as of right now. But moving on into our actual video clips from this area, we have seen a lot of the Russian Liberation Army on the move in film. Here's one of the first clips taken by a Russian citizen showing the Russian Liberation Army in the area. We can see him peering out a window, and we can see the occasional RLA soldier running through the open right here. We can see them right there.
Сколько их там? Еще пулемет, ёб твою мать. Пизда.
And so, with that, that's the end of that clip, but amazing to see that the RLA is taking massive swaths of ground. Not only that, but in the area of the village of Arkhangelskoye, we saw more RLA forces on the move in this area as well. And we can see the RLA soldiers on the side of this building. We can see one of them firing down the street as soldiers began to cross. We can see them now scooting across the street as the soldier continues to lay down fire, and we can see the last man in the line now turning around and moving across the street as well as they continue to take ground in the area of the Belgorod Oblast inside of Russia. Meanwhile, in the area of Novaya Tavlzhanka, again, we once again saw RLA soldiers on the move in this area as well. This was actually geolocated to the area of Novaya Tavlzhanka. When you see this soldier covering the corner of this building, we can hear what sounds to be gunfire, but it doesn't appear to be coming from this soldier, nor the soldiers in this column. And with that, that's the end of that clip. But very interesting to see, once again, the Russian Liberation Army has made a massive swath of ground inside of the Russian Federation. Meanwhile, we once again saw forces on the move, heading even deeper into the Belgorod Oblast, and of course, somewhat into the direction of Belgorod itself. And we can see them moving down a main highway right here. And when I say main highway, relative to this area of Russia, it's more like a small roadway. Massive firefights have immediately began to spring up as Russian forces have now reorganized somewhere in the area of Maslova Prostan and have now begun to move down the 14K-3 highway to engage the Ukrainian forces in the town of Shebekino. We have seen a massive firefight occurring on the outskirts of Shebekino here in this clip, and we can see that smoke is billowing from every single area of the forest as a massive firefight has ensued in between RLA forces and the Russian army. With that, that's the end of that clip right there, and we're now going to be moving on inside of Shebekino really quick before we get to this little clip here. In the middle of the day, we saw that the RLA forces, which of course, once again, I have to remind everyone, is a combined element of Freedom of Russia Legion and RDK forces working in unison. We're now going to be calling those from here forward the Russian Liberation Army. They proposed a meeting with the governor, the Russian governor of the Belgorod Oblast, to exchange 2 prisoners and to also discuss the fate of the Belgorod Oblast as a whole, showing that the Russian Liberation Army has far larger aims than a simple border incursion, at least this time. And so with that, we're going to be moving into that clip, and we're also going to be reading off the translation as well. And so here in this video, you can actually see the leader of the RDK right here dressed in all black. And we can also see the leader of the Freedom of Russia Legion back here in the background as well, standing in the same video. It appears that in this clip, the RDK leader is actually becoming the spokesman of the Russian Liberation Army and is the one laying out the terms to the governor of the Belgorod Oblast. Here's the clip. Dear Vasilivov Vladimir Volodymych, I butchered that. I'm the commander of the RDK. Next to me is a representative of the Legion of Freedom of Russia. On the other side are our prisoners. We are not far from this camp, and now they will tell you a few words. Birthplace, Pechesov. Name and surname, Alexei Belyev. Rank, Senior Lieutenant. Where are you from? Kishinka. Name and surname, Alexei Dmitrovich. Where are you from? Krasnodar. Today is a big Orthodox holiday, the Trinity. I suggest you exchange these prisoners for a couple of minutes of communication with you in the church, without weapons and without soldiers. If you come to the church today, we, as a gesture of goodwill, as it is customary to say in your homeland, we exchange you for the opportunity to talk about the fate of Russia, about the unnecessary bloody war that has been going on for a year and a half. And now it is already being waged on the territory of our homeland, on the territory of your Dolgorovsk region. Therefore, today before 5 p.m., you have a unique opportunity to communicate with us and take 2 citizens of the Russian Federation. Ordinary soldiers whom you and your political leadership sent to this battle. See ya. And that's the end of that clip, but we can actually see that there was a proposed meeting arrangement made today in between the Russian Liberation Army and the governor of the Belgorod Oblast. At this moment, we do not know if this was accepted by the governor of the Belgorod Oblast, and information about this proposed meeting has stopped beyond this video. So we do not know the fate of this proposed meeting and what actually happened to that. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on, and also someone just asked, that guy from Arizona said, is that guy dead? No, he's not. He actually answered some questions in the video. It appears that he may have been a wounded Russian soldier that was evacuated out of Ukraine, and he was just left behind in this hospital, and so he's here, and they're willing to exchange him with the Russians to just get him on out of there, since he's wounded. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip. And of course, this, I must say, we do not have picture and video evidence for. This has been hearsay that we've heard today. But we have heard that the Russian Liberation Army has actually been able to take a larger amount of prisoners in this conflict so far. Apparently, a decent amount of Russians were left behind in hospitals, either stricken with illness or suffering injuries from the war prior. We've also heard that there may have been a small contingent of Russian soldiers. When I say small, it's actually quite large. It's around 80 soldiers that were captured inside of a barracks, and they just gave up as soon as the Russian Liberation Army made it to them. From the official statements that we've heard, and once again, this is hearsay because we don't have any video or picture evidence to corroborate this, the Russian Liberation Army actually stated that they were going to be sending all of these prisoners by transport back into Ukraine and allowing the Ukrainians to take over the control of these prisoners and then to shift them into Ukrainian prisoner of war camps. So pretty wild and interesting to hear that they're taking massive amounts of prisoners, and the situation is incredibly bad for the Russian army. It is so bad at this point that they're now starting to use weapons on Russian soil that the Russians, at least in the eyes of the public, have claimed to have not used. One of those is white phosphorus. Of course, we've all seen the Russians using white phosphorus so far in the Ukraine war. There's been countless video documentations made about that, and we know that that is a common tactic of Russian infantry and the Russian army as a whole whenever they come into contact with urban fighting. They start to use white phosphorus to a massive degree. The Russian media outlets, the Russian state-controlled TV, has denied the claims that they've ever used white phosphorus on Ukrainian soldiers. However, it appears that they're going to start barraging the Russian Liberation Army just this night. And we're believing, and I'll say this real quick, we don't really know where this is, but it's supposed that this may have even been taken as white phosphorus falling on Maslova Pristan. And if that is the case, that means that the Russian Liberation Army is reaching the outskirts of Belgorod. But we saw them using white phosphorus on Russian Liberation Army soldiers today, and we got a video of that actually taken from a Russian soldier here. And so here's the clip. Those little bright white flashes out in the distance in the sky is white phosphorus being fired from Russian artillery and landing on the Russian Liberation Army. This is the first time that we've ever seen white phosphorus and other kinds of incendiary munitions being used by the Russian army on Russian territory. The white phosphorus begins to fall and continues to patter down onto the infantry below. Of course, we don't know how effective it was, considering it's landed in an urban area from what we know. We now see him turning around, and we can see the red leg bands on these soldiers, showing us that the man who's filming is a Russian soldier, and the guys here that are standing in this video are also Russian soldiers as well, watching as their own army drops incendiary munitions on what may be their own citizens inside of that village. Whether it be Shebekino or whether it be Novaya Pristan, there was never a full evacuation made of those towns. And so there is a large amount of Russian citizens that are still left within those villages and within those towns, and they're dropping white phosphorus on them. And that tells, if that doesn't tell the Russian public how little the Russian government actually cares for Russian-speaking people, which has been their massive sales pitch to the Russian public over the entirety of the war, is that they're out to protect Russian-speaking people, I don't know what would. Because trying to burn them out, along with the Russian Liberation Army, shows you how little they really care. But you see them casually discussing and conversating what's going on as they watch the white phosphorus. We hear them laughing and joking, and the video ends there. But of course, that is our first documented use of the Russians using white phosphorus on a town that still has citizens in it, that is inside of the Russian Federation, that is possibly killing Russian citizens. And that is the first time ever. And so with that, we're going to be moving on.
Here's a question for you real quick. I saw a very interesting one. TR said it's not a war crime if you attack your own people. Is that true? Because I've never really thought about that.
I would have a feeling that it may still be a war crime. That is a good question, though. Is the war... Well, I feel like that would actually fall under a crime against humanity, or something similar. Because remember, in Syria, it was supposed that the Assad regime began to use chemical weapons on their own citizens, and the United States actually responded with military force, claiming that that was a crime against humanity.
Interesting.
So I think that this would most likely be qualified as a crime against humanity, or it may be qualified as a war crime. I have a feeling that regardless whether they're your own citizens or not, targeting citizens or civilians as a overall umbrella term, with incendiary munitions or any kind of weaponry for that matter, would be considered a war crime, considering that it's happening during a war and it is an act of war being inflicted upon the civilian populace. So I have a feeling it's most likely a war crime, but if it isn't, it would certainly fall under a crime against humanity to bombard civilian areas with incendiaries. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the area of Shebekino, where we can once again see that chaos is unfolding within the Belgorod city area as air defenses have been activated in an attempt to shoot down incoming flying objects. We do not know what kind of flying objects these were, so they're UFOs, they could be missiles, they could be drones, they could be anything, but we did see Belgorod air defense responding to them and attempting to shoot them down. It does appear that they were able to take down one, but we don't know if that was the only one that was fired or not. We can see the missile flying up in air. And that's the end of that clip. Moving on into our next one, we can actually see what appears to be the same missile making contact with some kind of a flying object and maybe taking it down. Although, once again, we're not entirely sure. We can see it hitting right there.
Сбила, ебать. Это что за хуйня?
We can now see fragments of the missile or fragments of the object that it attempted to shoot down, now burning in air as they slowly fall to the ground.
Ща как въебет.
And we can now hear the sound finally catching up to the cameraman of the missile traveling, and we'll probably hear the explosion here in a moment. Right there, actually.
На нахуй. Эй. Еще одна.
We now see him still looking into the sky as another surface-to-air missile is launched in an attempt to shoot down another unidentified flying object.
Далеко ушла.
And that one disappears behind a building, so we didn't get to see if it hit anything. But you still see burning fragments falling from the sky from the other object that may or may not have been intercepted, but it does show that Belgorod, the city, is now coming under fire. And what's ironic about the city of Belgorod coming under attack in a way is that if many of y'all remember the very beginning of the war, and some of y'all are old guards of this channel and were around when we first started covering the war, within the first hour of the war beginning, as it did in 2022, many of y'all may remember that Belgorod was the staging area for the offensives occurring near the Sumy city area, and also the siege of Kharkiv, which lasted for around, I believe, several months. Belgorod was a major city as far as the war was concerned. It was strategic, and it was also the city that the Russians were using to launch offensives into the rest of Ukraine in that area. And now we see, an entire year later, that city itself is now going to be the one that's under attack by Russian liberation forces, and it appears that the Russian army is nowhere to be seen at the moment. They are putting up a very shoddy resistance to the RLA, and it appears that the RLA is continuing to make progress. Like I said a minute ago, that video of the white phosphorus being fired was supposedly in the area of the far northern outskirts of Shebekino, around here, or may have even been them dropping incendiaries on Maslova Pristan, up here. If we go to a satellite picture, and we take a look at this area, here's Maslova Pristan, and here are the very outskirts of Belgorod. This is where Belgorod practically begins, in the suburb of Razom. They are a few miles, if that is the case, if they are actually in Maslova Pristan, they are only a few miles away from the Belgorod city area, and they may be only a few miles away from beginning the capture of the city of Belgorod. This is massive, and it's showing that the Russian army is incredibly weak. And of course, and I have to say this because some people have come in tonight and said, hey, this isn't the news about the counteroffensive. It isn't, but considering that these guys are pushing towards Belgorod and creating a critically dangerous situation for the Russian Federation, And on top of that, the Russian bloggers, because of course the Ukrainians don't make any comments about the stuff when it's happening, the Russian bloggers have claimed that there has been a major breakthrough in the area of the Zaporizhzhia front. I'm not even going to say where it is in the Zaporizhzhia front. I'll just tell y'all that one did happen, at least according to Russian military bloggers. And it appears that the Russian army, much like the battl.e offensive, is in a complete rout and completely disorganized at this moment, at least where this breakthrough occurred. It was fast, it was very precise, and it was laser point accurate on a specific area of the front lines, breaking clean through, and now Ukrainian forces, from what we understand, are starting to spill into the rear line areas of these Russian forces, and that is a death knell for that part of the front line for the Russians, from what we understand. We can't get into any specific details, because I do have to say, from what we understand, the counteroffensive is only about 6 hours old at this point, maybe 8 hours old at the latest. So we don't really want to get into a lot of information. We usually give it around 24 hours before we report on what's going on in a counteroffensive, because reporting on stuff right now about what we've heard and what Russian military bloggers are saying may be an operational security risk to those brave and selfless and valiant Ukrainian soldiers that are pushing that offensive right now, giving information as to where they may be and where they are moving, maybe putting their lives in jeopardy. And so we won't be saying anything specifically about where they are moving and where they are going right now, but from what we understand and from what the preliminary news that is coming out is saying, the offensive is underway at this moment, at the exact same time that the Russian Liberation Army is marching on Belgorod. The Russians have...
And also, we just hit $30,000.
What? No way! Wait a minute,
Yes,
hang on, let me...
sir.
Oh my god! $30,028!
$30,000. Yes, sir.
Yeah! That is crazy! I cannot believe that. I gotta say, I really honestly, I feel like we're living in like some kind of, I feel like I'm in a fever dream right now, because I kind of do feel like I'm feverish, and this is unbelievable. I can't believe this. This is insane. This is honestly the, rather than the year anniversary where we raised $64,000, which has to be the greatest day in channel history ever in the amount of support that we gave to a nonprofit operating in Ukraine, this has to be the best day of this channel's history ever. And in fact, I'm completely at a loss right now for words, to be honest with y'all. I don't really know what to say about this. It's just unbelievable. Put an you know what? I'm gonna put an LSA in the chat. That's really all I can say. That speaks for itself. The LSA is all we need to say, because everyone knows what the LSA did tonight, and there will never be a doubt about what the LSA has done in support of Ukraine. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next clip. And this one is fairly interesting. This one's actually from a little while ago, from when the RDK and FOR crossed the border near Gryveron. And we actually saw that there was a Polish contingent of RDK soldiers that were involved in this offensive, and their video footage just came out today. And so with that, here's their video footage of what they did during that border incursion. And the LSAs are rolling in at 1,000,000 miles an hour right now. Like, golly. Yeah. But anyways, we see the watermark of the Polish RDK right here. We can hear some artillery exploding practically on top of them. Oh, you now see the Polish RDK getting ready to advance across the front with a T-72B, or maybe even a T-72M, and also a US-supplied Humvee. We can now see their forces moving out a wounded soldier from the area of Gryveron. And we can now see their tank, it is a T-72B, rolling into the area, waving a Ukrainian flag. We can now see them showing... You know what this is?
What does it say?
It says Russian Post, pretty much. It's the post office sign. They literally like pried it off the wall of the post office and cried around here like, we have taken the post office, kiss it. I love it.
If you want to send your mail, you send it through us now.
Man, call us the Russian post office because this shit was same day delivery, bled.
Always on time, guaranteed.
We give ear whooping same day delivery. We can now see them taking the BTR-82 that they called at the Gryveron border checkpoint. And we can now hear some helicopters flying in the distance. And believe it or not, and interestingly enough, is a Ukrainian marked Mi-17 or an Mi-8 with clear Ukrainian markings on it. Just putting that out there. You know, just putting that out, because I know a lot of people, and I would agree, they are Russian nationals, but we have seen many Mi-7s, well, not Mi-7s, sorry, Mi-8s and Mi-17s that have been in operation with the Ukrainian army that have these exact same markings. So it is fairly interesting to see, but we can see it flying over, of course, in support of the infantry below, and we see a second one right there. We can now see them inside the border checkpoint area again at Gryveron. We hear some artillery coming in. Hold up. Wait a minute. Hold up. That's actually... Wait a minute. Hang on. Let me explain this. This will take some explaining here. What we just heard was a jet flying over, and if y'all were here when the actual border incursion happened, we got a drone video from the FOR and RDK forces showing two Su-34s fly over this border checkpoint that these Polish volunteers are in and drop, and of course I can't really say it, but they are slowed bombs, but the actual term is something that YouTube will probably consider to be derogatory, although it's not, it's just a technical term for the bomb, but they dropped what we'll call parachute bombs onto this checkpoint. And this is actually the footage of the RDK Polish volunteers that were in that checkpoint when that bombing run occurred. It was actually off the mark. It all landed outside of the checkpoint, but we can actually hear the jet flying over and the bombs exploding in this clip. So going back again, we hear the rumbling of the jet. They go running for cover. You hear it flying over. And then the bombs explode right there. There should be a second one coming over here soon. And here comes the second one. And then we'll hear the bombs exploding again, right there. We can now see the footage is cut later on, and we can see what appears to be the back of a BTR, maybe the BTR number 430. We now see them handing out some AT weapons to the soldiers, like candy to babies. they're about to be handing out this candy to the sweet Russian soldiers on the other side. We now see them crossing the street, and we can now see more Gryveron border checkpoint footage. We now see them moving around. This appears to be after the bombing. We can still see BTR number 430 right there, the one that was captured by the RDK. And with that, that's seeing the clip. Those were the video footage clips from the Polish RDK forces that were involved in the Gryveron crossing a couple of weeks ago. Of course, those forces have now coalesced and combined with the Freedom of Russia Legion to create what we know as the Russian Liberation Army. And it appears that once again, their goals during this border incursion are far larger than the ones they had during the last border incursion at Gryveron. And it appears that they are now intent and hell-bent on taking Russian territory and holding it for as long as they can, maybe even indefinitely. We're now going to be moving on from this area of the Belgorod Oblast, and we're now going to be moving into the area of the Bucha-Hostomel direction, near Kyiv. And we once again got some pictures showing what this area looks like a year later. And these are actually pictures taken from the exact same locations that they were taken after the Battle of the Bucha-Hostomel European area occurred. This is what it looked like in 2022 after the battle. This is what it looks like now. And going into the next one, we can see the street, which I would call Massacre Street, where the Russians were just wiped out. And also, I love that German Shepherd. That's a very beautiful German Shepherd right there. And now we can see that exact same spot of the street today. And moving on into the next picture, we can once again see the street. I believe this is actually another street where the Russians just, of course, got slaughtered. And then we can see that street as it is today. and the trees in the exact same location as they were last year. And I've got to be honest, as far as reconstruction efforts go after the war, the Ukrainians are doing an amazing job at this, at least from the Bucha Hospital Irpin area that we've seen. They have put in a decent amount of time, effort, and quality into what has been rebuilt in this area, and I would honestly have to say it looks far better than it did before the war even began. And you got to give a
They
lot of...
worked fast on this reconstruction.
Yeah, I mean, like, they do. And look at the houses. The houses are brand new, up to a modern spec. They're no longer the older Soviet-era houses that existed in that area. They're brand new. I mean, they've really put in a lot of quality and effort into this. And I've got to say a huge round of thanks and appreciation to all of those reconstruction workers who are working in construction, who are working on clearing up the debris and trying to find, of course, anything that needs to be cleaned in this area. They've been doing amazing work, and the Ukrainian government, as far as we can tell, at least in the Bucha Hospital Irpin area, has been on top of trying to rebuild after the war has moved on. And I've got to say, that's amazing to see and great to know. And of course, that's kind of, not really in a way, what Razom for Ukraine does. They're not involved in rebuilding things like this, but they are involved in trying to help to rebuild lives, or at least save lives from perishing through their support in medical aid, medical assistance, even paying for surgeries, and also helping some of these brave soldiers that faced the Russian army down here in the Bucha Hospital Irpin area before it was even known by most of the world that the Russian army could be stopped, that stopped this assault right here and there. And Razom is also helping those guys to get a stipend from Razom, pretty much a scholarship that will help them to go to a university in Ukraine and learn a trade that after the war they'll be able to use to support their families and themselves. And I gotta say, absolutely amazing and absolutely incredible to see the efforts that the Ukrainians are already going into in the reconstruction efforts. We're now going to be moving on from the Bucha Hospital Irpin area and on into our location unknowns. There's a smaller amount of them tonight, and it's not a... I would have to be honest with y'all, these location unknowns are just location unknowns. Some of them are pretty neat, some of them are just kind of, normal run-of-the-mill stuff, looking at some interesting vehicles from the Ukrainian side, and of course the Russian casualty report. Before we get into these location unknowns, we have to address some of the leading questions that Matthew has asked all of y'all tonight, and what y'all's input is on those questions, and we also have to recognize the hundreds of y'all at this point that have massively supported this fundraiser and made it possible for the Lee Spring Army to reach a total of $30,500 raised in support of Ukraine so far tonight, and in support of Razom. And so with that, Matthew, take it away.
All right, and it is now time for our first question segment of the night. After that very historic $30,469 raised for Razom for charity. Incredibly impressive, and once again, thank you all very much for helping us to reach that figure. None of this would be possible without the LSA and all the generosity, so really a heartfelt thank you to you all, because this will make history on the channel for sure, and also help a lot of people in Ukraine. Also, by the way, quick note, no super chats tonight. I still need a lot more live chat questions for later on in the stream. So if you have one for us, put @EnforcerMatt in the live chat, and we will get to it probably before the stream ends tonight. And also, Enforcer, do you want to go over the polls first or the top donors? I have a whole spreadsheet full of top donors tonight.
I would have to say we must. It is dictated by edict tonight that we go over those top donors first.
All right, so bear with me, folks. This is the longest list I've ever seen of top donors, so it's going to be a good second. Also, have to call out first the largest donation of the night. It was made anonymously, but we had someone fess up. It was Mark, General of the LSA, who put in a $15,000 donation, which took us up to that, I think it was about $20,000 almost, right off the bat. So, Mark, huge thanks to you. That is beyond generous. It's hard to comprehend how generous that is, and thank you so much. And before we get off of Mark's donation right there, we also have a $10,000 from Mark. That was the second one that he put in, also extremely generous. And Enforcer, what say you while I catch up in the live chat?
I have to say that Mark has been a massive part of how these fundraisers have been successful. And if we were to subtract the amount that he has supported this fundraiser with tonight, we would only be at this moment around $8,500 raised in support of Razom for Ukraine tonight. I cannot overstate how instrumental Mark, General, Field Marshal of the LSA, has been and helping these fundraisers to get to where they are. Mark has done massive efforts and massive help in making these fundraisers truly amazing. And I have to thank Mark so much once again, and I'm sure the entirety of the Lee Spring Army thanks Mark a massive deal for making this fundraiser what it is. It is unbelievable, and without Mark, it wouldn't have been possible for us, even at this moment, to have passed $1 million raised. Of course, I also have to thank everyone else who has helped out so far. The people who put in $5, y'all have ranged in the hundreds. We've seen so many of those tonight. It is unbelievable. And all those $5 donations and $20 donations and $50 donations, they all add up to an unbelievable degree. And they equal up into the thousands themselves. And to all of y'all, including Mark, who's been the massive heavy hitter of the night, I've got to thank each and every one of y'all for making these fundraisers possible and helping us to not only reach the fundraiser goal tonight, but to blow clean through it. Rarely in the history of this channel, recently, over about the past 5 months, have fundraisers gotten to this size ever. And tonight, we have proven that once again, the Lee Spring Army knows no bounds, knows no limits. The Lee Spring Army is the greatest community on YouTube. And it's unfathomable how amazing of a community it is. There's no other community out there on YouTube that can lay claim to an entire $1 million raised over all of the fundraisers that have ever been run in the channel's history. Honestly, I just got to be completely honest. I don't even know how to thank all of y'all tonight for making this possible. It honestly is something I cannot even comprehend tonight to even be excited about, because I actually thought this would be a hell of a battle tonight. And you can ask Matthew. We were like, man, that is a tall order right there. 22,000.
We were hoping, because Andrew had hyped it up quite a bit. I was thinking hopefully we can reach that $1 million figure, or otherwise it might be slightly of a letdown. But instead, we went well beyond the goal to even hit $1 million. I can't do the math, obviously, but we're somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million and something. Somebody that can let me know, please let me know.
Honestly, I'm at such a loss for words, and it's been such a daze to believe that we reached the goal in something like 20 or 30 minutes tonight. I can't even remember how quick it was. It was like 20 or 30 minutes. I can't even mentally comprehend it right now. So we're just going to pass it on over to calling out every single one of y'all who has put in a large donation to the fundraiser tonight. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so back to the top donations of the night. Up next, we have a $1,000 donation from Hal Rose and Malachite. And thank you both very much. That is very generous as well. $1,000 each.
Damn.
Incredibly impressive. Very generous. And up next, we have a $750 donation from Alex Yurchenko. We also have a $550 from Sylvester the Cat, Retail Mix USA. We have a $500 from Steve Furman, Dutch R. Jen, David Schmidt. And we have a $466 from Miss Disa. And once again, to all 7 or 8 of you, thank you very much. Very generous. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I've got to thank every single one of y'all once again for the massive amount of support that y'all gave. Y'all have also been instrumental parts of how this fundraiser has been able to get to where it is tonight. And not only that, loads of y'all have been around forever and have helped all of these fundraisers to get to where they are. Every single one of them. If it wasn't for y'all in the Lee Spring Army, the thousands of y'all who support these fundraisers, it wouldn't have been possible. It would have never been possible for us to make it to $1 million raised. And there's no community out there that is as amazing and as impressive as this one. I truly mean that. From the bottom of my heart, I have never seen a community on YouTube that is as amazing as the Lee Spring Army. And actually, because of this, we're going to be trying to get the word of the Lee Spring Army out there in massive form here in the future. We're going to be trying to see about doing press releases and other things to let folks know who y'all are and what y'all have been able to do. Because y'all own these fundraisers. Y'all are the reasons why they're able to get to where they are. Because, you know, of course, I always put in my $100 every single Sunday, and sometimes more than that. But y'all are the ones who put in the thousands of dollars that pass these things over goals. That $100 means nothing in perspective of how much y'all raise as Lee Spring Army. And all of the credit goes to every single one of y'all who has stuck it through with this channel, who has supported all of these fundraisers, and marched our way all the way up to $1 million. And I've got to tell y'all, we're going to let the entire world know who y'all all are and what y'all have done. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, I believe we're on to the polls now.
We're actually back to our very long list of donors, and this time I'm going to try to get all the way through it. I was trying to catch up in the live chat, so I keep saying, "What say you?" Typically, I don't do that. But up next, we have a very generous $500 donation from Donna Olson. Very generous. We also have a 200 from Jayburn. We have a 150 from DCC Prime 1, as well as a 130 from Cindy Mitchell. Then we have several $100 donations. The first is from John Webster. We have one from John Dameron, some guy called the Enforcer, some guy called Skip Tracer. We also have one from Gently Used Oreos. We have one from Galrock, William Hayes, Kev C, Terrence Custer, BC Skyman, ASCII892, Dima Tikachenko, USA. Heather Fitzgibbon put in a 50, along with Miles Wagner, who also put in a 50, and David L., Airplane, Marcia Tucker, John Gamber, David L., R. Willis, Greg Carrier, Rod Cam, Jack Nordhusen. We also have a 50 from Gary Moore, Call for Billy, Axel K., Volker Ebert, Scott Engerman, Enforcer for President. We also have a 50 from Ronald Mead, Ryan Whitehouse, Stuart Parrott, Cliff H., Madhu. Going once, going twice. We have a 50 from NBD. We also have a 50 from Melanie Larson. We have one from Alan Champ, the Eukster, Underwater Comms, Sturmeyer, Grand Nagus of the LSA. We have one from Trister 1. We have one from Zuan Tran, John Wicken, Keith Lukes, and Martin Haig. And that was an extremely long list. But once again, thank you all very much for the generosity, even if we did not call out your name, because we had an incredible amount of other smaller donations. Big thanks to you all, because it all added up to $30,714.
And of course, I have to thank this next batch as well. I feel like at this point, Matthew, we're at graduation again, and we're going magna cum laude. I almost feel like it's that again. But I got to thank all of y'all so much for getting this fundraiser to where it is. Everyone we've named, and all of the folks who are going unnamed tonight. There are thousands of y'all who have put in a donation tonight to tonight's fundraiser. And I always feel somewhat sad that we can't call all of y'all out, because there's so many of them that Matthew tried to keep document of every single person who has donated. We wouldn't be able to. And also, YouTube doesn't give us a list. They just manage the account, and they don't really tell us the actual people who made what kind of donations. It just comes in live, and we got to catch it then, or we never see it again. And I got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for making the Lee Spring Army what it is, and making it as special as it could be. And so, thank you once again for y'all's support to tonight's fundraiser. Thank y'all for helping out Razom, and thank you for helping this channel, the Enforcer channel, and the Lee Spring Army make it to $1 million raised. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we're now going to be moving on into our leading questions of the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so hopping into our first poll question, it says Zelensky thanks soldiers by name before the offensive and calls the situation very dangerous. And what are your thoughts? 64% said the offensive will sadly be very costly. 24% said the offensive will have normal losses. 8% said unsure, and 5% said, it's just the usual talk. And I have to say that to me, I think the losses will probably be somewhat costly. But sadly, that is the cost of war. I do think Ukraine will be successful in their counteroffensive, but Zelensky is certainly doing the right thing by going out and thanking the soldiers by name, because they are doing a tremendous service to Ukraine, and I'm definitely with the 64%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it's great to hear that Zelensky is recognizing soldiers individually before this offensive, and of course, you know, it's an unfortunate thing to talk about, but the reality is that it will be a very costly offensive for the Ukrainians. No offensive is ever easy, and no offensive ever comes without losses. There were many incredible guys, incredible young men who lost their lives in the beaches of Normandy, in the Bocage beyond that, in the Battle of the Bulge, at the Battle of Arnhem. Many great young men lose their lives in offensives and defensives in war. And it is, of course, inevitable that the Ukrainians will most likely end up losing a large amount of folks. And also, Matthew, are there two Kaltenbergs?
One of the Kaltenbergs was an imposter. He got Stugned.
What the hell? We got a fake Kaltenberg in here? What the?
There was a Kaltenberg. You should be honored. You had an imposter.
You actually had a real imposter in purple and everything. That was wildly weird because I saw like two different colored Kaltenbergs come out, one blue and one purple, and I kept on looking. I was thinking, am I having a stroke or is the color changing on their profile picture? And it was.
I felt like Mr. Spock when he had the two Kirks and you wasn't sure which one was which. You were looking at both thinking, who is it? Who is it? Which one's the bad one?
Oh my god, that was so weird. That's so bizarre. Why in the world would someone try and fake being Kaltenberg? I mean, like that's just wild. That's weird. But anyways, moving on from that, I would say, of course, that the offensive, getting back into the seriousness of the situation, is going to be costly for the Ukrainians. I don't think it will be as costly as a Russian offensive. Russian offensives are in their own ballpark for how costly they are, but compared to the normal losses that Ukraine has been seeing over this war, which is probably around 100 to 200 soldiers per day, this offensive will most likely be quite costly to them. But of course, it is a sacrifice they must make to reclaim the territory of Ukraine that they have lost so far in this war, and to liberate all of those citizens behind the lines who have been subjugated to Russian control for the last year and a half, and years more in the Crimean Oblast, and also within the DPR and the LPR. And so with that, I hope that does address that one fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second poll says, is the upcoming Ukraine summer offensive their last stand, or is it just another phase of the war? 55% said it's just another phase of war, 23% said it's too early to tell, 17% said it's the last stand to end the war, and 4% said unsure. And I'm certainly with the 55%. This counteroffensive is not going to be the end of the war. Zelensky has already made that clear. It is going to reclaim a lot of strategic territory that was lost, and I'm sure it'll be very successful at driving the Russians back. It's going to drain their resources, and Russia is going to be at a complete loss to keep up with the advances that are being made. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to certainly agree. At this point, the Russians appear to be a dead carcass of a nation. They don't really have an army. They don't have an ability to control or operate the army they have right now. They may as well be a country in the throes of death. And so I do not believe that they will be able to counter anything at this point that the Ukrainians or the Russian Liberation Army throw at them. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our third and last poll of the first question segment says, should Ukraine commit all of their resources to the summer offensive or conserve resources for later? This was a pretty evenly distributed poll. It looks like 41% said yes, Ukraine should go all in. 30% said no, Ukraine should conserve resources. 20% said I see both sides of the issue, and 9% said unsure. And on this one, I kind of see both sides of the issue. If Ukraine, obviously they have more intel than we know. If they think they have a reasonable, good chance to push Russia out of the country pretty much all the way, I would say commit everything they have. But if they know that they're probably not going to be able to do that, even if they committed everything, I would say conserve resources to make sure you can keep up with an extended period of war. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I hate to say this. You know what I'm about to say. Reread the line. I'm so sorry.
It said, let's see here. Should Ukraine commit all their resources to the summer offensive or conserve resources for later?
They should conserve resources for later, because one offensive is not going to end this war. It is certainly going to be a death knell for the Russians in Ukraine, but the war will continue on probably for longer after this offensive ends. So I do believe that they should make sure to conserve their resources and keep them in the rear, so that way once this offensive ends, they can continue on the war with the same strength and conviction that they've had over 466 days. And so with that, I hope that does address that one fairly well as well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll for now. So we're moving on to our live chat questions. And of course, got to mention it again. If you have one for us, please send it to @EnforcerMatt. Right now, I have a total of 19. But up first, we're going to address the Morse code of the stream. It was solved tonight by Mark Hodges, Cife, JP's Gone Fishing, Cliff Simonson, Earl Bernew, and Paul Schultz. They said tonight's Morse cipher says, the offensive begins and the LSA will push over the $1 million mark. Onwards, LSA, with Ukraine to victory.
That's the sound of money, and you all got that correct. And I can't believe it. I actually thought by the time we would read that Morse code message off, that would be my time to rally the fundraiser again and to try and get it closer to the goal. But wildly enough and weirdly enough, we were well over the goal at this point. We're at $30,861, which is over $8,000 above the actual fundraiser goal for the night. And I can't believe that. It's like, I really can't even comprehend that right now, to even really be over the moon about that. I didn't think we would do it that quickly. In fact, I really didn't think we'd do it tonight at all. I thought it would probably be something that happened next weekend. Yet we did it in 30 minutes. And so, thank you for deciphering the Morse code message again. I'm trying to figure out how to come up with the words again about that, because every time I look at that number, I'm like, oh my god, we've actually passed 1 million. And then I'm like, what do I say? What do I do? But I got to thank you all so much once again for deciphering that Morse code message, and that was the correct one. And it is unbelievable to think that the Elite Spring Army has been hand in hand with Ukraine over the course of this entire war on this channel, listening to the news, supporting fundraisers, and has been able to surpass 1 million raised. There's no other channel on YouTube at this moment right now, rather than one, which is Mr. Beast, which is obviously the largest channel on YouTube, that can lay claim to having raised $1 million in support of Ukraine. No other channel out there can claim that. We are the first one that has been able to do that. Of course, outside of Mr. Beast. And I kind of consider Mr. Beast an anomaly, considering that, you know, he's got like 130 million subs, and the channel, I believe, is valued at like $1 billion nearly. So,
and also he's got a whole team behind him. We're just two young kids, basically, and going to law school.
Yeah, so, you know, I kind of consider him an anomaly. He's not really like the rest of the Ukraine war world. And he also doesn't really cover the war. You know, he just did that, you know, on the Beast philanthropy thing. But I've got to admit, though, that was amazing. And it's great to know that he sent, I believe it was something like $3 million of material aid to Ukraine. It was humanitarian aid. It wasn't military aid, obviously. It was just humanitarian aid, like we do. But it is amazing to know that out of all of the normal Ukraine war channels, this community is the one that can claim they reached 1 million first. No other community will ever be able to lay claim to that. It is a matter of prestige and pride for the Elite Spring Army, for this channel, and it is a matter of great pride to me. It's something that I can't even really process, that I can now say, because up till this point in the war, whenever people said, oh, you run fundraisers? I go, yeah, we've, like, our channel has, like, raised 500,000 for Ukraine, or 400,000, or 600,000, and people would go, whoa, that's crazy. And now, if anyone asks that question, I say we've raised $1 million in support of Ukraine as a channel. I can't believe that. I mean, like, that's just unbelievable. It's unfathomable. There's so much that so many lives that you can save, so many lives that you can change with $1 million, and this is just crazy. I mean, like, it is literally insane. $1 million. And it did, and we've done it. And also, chronically, Alien said, "Do your parents know?" Oh yeah, they know. I mean, like,
they probably heard by now.
Yeah, we were
all just yelling.
We were talking about it out there with them before we went into our rooms and started running the stream. I was like, "Oh yeah, tonight's going to be the night. We've got to pass 1 million. That's the goal." You know, and they were like, "Man, that's a steep goal, $22,763." I was like, "Yep, but we got to do it." I was like, "We got to do it." And I can't believe it. We did it. We did it. So when we come back on stream on Tuesday, this channel from here forward will have the name, well, really the title of raising $1 million for Ukraine. It's unbelievable. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also,
move on.
Yeah, we're going to move on from that. How stupid. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message.
All right, and real quick before we move on to our next question, I got to give a shout out. We did have a mail call, one of our last mail calls where we changed the rules slightly on the P.O. Box. We've had a change of heart on that, and I'm sure the enforcer will explain that in a minute. But I want to shout out Rob Eisman, Tom Madison, and Zachary Green. They each sent us something very cool in the P.O. Box. I opened it today, of course, with the PPE, but nonetheless, Rob, thank you very much. He sent us a Fallout 4 book along with some very cool patches from one of the submarines that he served on. So very cool, and thank you very much, Rob, for that. Tom, he sent us pieces of coal from a historic shipwreck. Also, he works in reef reconstruction, so that's really cool to hear as well. And Zachary, he sent us some really cool Welsh memorabilia, which was very cool as well. And big shout out to all three of you. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it was incredibly neat that they sent this stuff to us, and I actually had to go over there and grab some of the things real quick so that way I could be able to state some of the facts accurately, make sure I don't screw up the name. So, Tom, who sent us some stuff in the P.O. Box, and I'll also be explaining the future and fate of the P.O. Box because we've actually had a little bit of a change of heart. There's kind of a stay of execution going on with that thing right now. But to start off with Tom's was incredibly cool because he actually sent us the remains of some coal, and only 42 pieces of coal has been found from this shipwreck of a Mexican petroleum tanker called the SS Potrero de Llano that was sunk off the eastern coast of Florida in 1942 by a German U-boat. And as far as I know, that is probably one of a handful, because there were very few ships in the Second World War that were sunk near the area of Florida or inside of the Gulf of Mexico, because getting a U-boat out that far was incredibly difficult and a massive logistical challenge for the Germans to do. But that ship was sunk off the east coast of Florida. And if y'all don't know this, this is a very interesting fact about the Portreo de Llano, which I'm hopefully pronouncing that correctly. That was actually the version of Lusitania from Mexico as far as World War II went. When that ship was sunk, what is, Matthew, sunk or sank?
I think it's sank.
When that ship sank off the east coast of Florida and 13 Mexican crew members were killed, that actually forced the Mexicans' hand into joining the Allies in the Second World War. And so that is the ship that is responsible for Mexico being a part of World War II. And it's amazingly cool because only 42 pieces of coal have been recovered from that ship. And Tom sent us 3 of those pieces of coal. And that is so cool, especially for me being a huge avid historian and actually having a degree in history. That is so cool to know that we actually have pieces of history in the coal. And also everyone's saying it's sunk, not sank. So, Alabama vocabulary, Matthew, it is failing us right now. But
it filled with water and went to the bottom.
That thing filled with water, Jimmy, and it damn went under. But anyways, it is so cool to know that Tom sent us that. And Tom is actually a pretty big person in the maritime world. He actually runs a company that does reef restoration down there in that part of Florida, and has a huge fleet of ships that does that. And I got to thank you, Tom, so much for sending such a cool piece of history. Matthew can tell you, I was really over the top about that because it's so cool to get rare artifacts like that, and especially from a ship that was so important, at least in Mexico's history, as far as World War II went. And we have 3 pieces of coal. There's only 42 of them in the world. And I got to thank you so much for sending 3 of those to us. That is a great honor. And moving on from Tom's amazing stuff that he sent in the mail, Rob also sent us some really cool stuff in the mail as well. He sent us the Submariner badges, I believe they're called, that you get when you become a submariner in the U.S. Navy. And he also sent us the patch of, I believe it is the submarine that he served on, which is the USS George C. Marshall. The USS George C. Marshall was the only ship in the Navy to be named after the Army General George C. Marshall. It was a Benjamin Franklin class nuclear submarine, and here's a picture of it right here, I believe in its shakedown trials in 1966, before it actually was commissioned in service. This submarine actually ended up getting in a collision around 1967 with a Soviet submarine, I believe underwater, which ended up damaging its portside ballast tanks and caused a very precarious situation for the submarine and forced it to return to Spain for emergency repairs, and then on back, I believe, to the United States at Newport News to get a complete, I guess you could say, repair on the damage that was caused by the collision. It went on to serve all the way up until 1992, and it was decommissioned. And it is an incredibly interesting, incredibly neat submarine. One of the, I guess you could say, one of those first generation nuclear powered subs that the United States had. And also, everyone's saying it's a boat. I call this thing a sub. I call this thing a sub.
You can buy me a boat.
You can buy me a boat. But still, incredibly cool to get the badges and also the patches as well, because he sent us USS George C. Marshall patches. And he also sent something, Matthew, really cool that he really likes, which is a Fallout 4 book. It's actually the book that goes through the concept art and the development process of Fallout 4 before it actually was released, and Matthew is a huge fan of that. And I got to thank you so much, Rob, for sending all of that neat stuff as well. And now it's time to move on to James Green, who sent us Welsh cakes. Multiple flavors of Welsh cakes. I think it's every single flavor that company makes. And I've got to thank you so much for sending that. Of course, us having a massive amount of Welsh ancestry, it is incredibly cool to get Welsh cakes. They look kind of like hoe cakes, honestly, which I think is really neat. We will hopefully be giving those a try here in the future, probably with some jam or something similar. But I wanted to thank all 3 of y'all so much for sending us that cool stuff, and to also explain what we'll be doing with the P.O. box from here forward. The address will most likely be changed for security reasons, because of course there is a lot of people out there, whether they be pro-Russian or whether they just be crazy, that wish us harm. And it's gotten to a new level at this point, and so we've had to end up closing that P.O. box and kind of erasing its number from our YouTube About page, where you could find our P.O. box address. However, we will be getting a new P.O. box address, but instead of it being a public P.O. box address, if you want to send us something, you'll have to meet these criteria. You'll have to be, one, a person that we've seen for a long time on this channel and know. Two, you will have to inform us that you are sending a package, so that way we can give you the P.O. box address. And three, you will also have to disclose what will be inside of the box, or the package, because there are some things that we usually don't end up doing anything with. For example, sadly, food. We usually can't eat food because, it's coming through the mail, and especially when anyone could send it, we didn't really know if it was poisoned or not, or it had been tampered with. So, we're going to be operating our P.O. box in a new way. So if you want to send something to us, just make sure that you've been around, that you're an upstanding member of this community, and then just let us know you're sending something, and then we'll give you the new P.O. box address, so that way you can send it. Because getting the stuff that we got today, considering that that's pretty much our last P.O. box run at the current address, and getting the little fragments of coal and also the submarine patches and the Welsh cakes made us think, folks, there are a lot of well-intentioned, great folks out there, and there's loads of y'all. Really, there's so much more great, nice people that watch this channel than there are mean and sick people who watch this channel and just hate the thing. And I don't want to deprive y'all of an ability to send us stuff like that, to incredibly neat gifts that we highly cherish and are greatly honored to receive. We don't really want to stop y'all from doing that just because of a few bad eggs. So we'll be making sure to run it that way from here forward, so that way everyone doesn't end up pretty much being punished from the actions of a few sick, weird people who, for some reason, want to threaten to kill us, whether they, be from anywhere for that matter, or threaten to send threaten to defecate in a box and then send that to us in the mail, which is obviously a huge biohazard issue. Stuff like that. We kind of want to avoid that stuff going on here forward. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, I think we are on to the next one.
All right. So our next question, actually our first question from the live chat, goes to Gabriel Mom, who says, if somehow all the corruption in Russia would stop right now, do you think that would be enough for Russia to turn the war around?
Can you reread that one again? That's just...
If somehow all the corruption in Russia would stop right now, do you think that would be enough for Russia to turn the war around?
It probably would be, in all honesty. But, that's in fiction. There's no such thing as corruption being ridded from the Russian governmental system. No matter who's in charge in Russia, it's going to be a really corrupt government. That's really the honest take on it. And, even in countries like the United States, which is actually pretty low on a corruption scale as far as, corruption scales are listed. And I don't really know who is the one who's arbitrarily making that scale. I don't know. But the U.S. actually ranks pretty low on that scale, yet there is still a great amount of corruption even here in the United States when you really think about it. On a Russian scale, though, we're like clean. There's almost no corruption in the U.S. government compared to what the Russians do. But, there's things every once in a while in the U.S. government or local governments that happen. Like, for example, the Birmingham waterworks going bankrupt because people were just stealing the money out of the waterworks, things like that. There's stuff like that does happen here, but it's nothing compared to Russia, where soldiers get fed dog food, and once you finally realize that it's dog food and you speak out about it, you get put in prison for 10 years because they came up with some trumped-up charges. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the second to last question of this segment.
All right, and this is actually our last one. It goes to David Huss. He says, what are your thoughts on Ukraine going into Transnistria to capture the 20,000 tons of ammo at Kobazna Ammunition Depot and give the area back to Moldova?
It would be a neat idea, but I do believe that is drawing vital Ukrainian resources and war effort away from the front lines and into a second front, which may be detrimental for them in a way, or really start to slow them down. Because right now, those Russians in Transnistria aren't going to do anything. That's really the reality of it. There's no way for them to be resupplied or rearmed. There's no way for them to be reinforced. And that is as bad as a position that the Russians could be in anywhere. Under those kinds of conditions, no one is going to do anything. And so those Russians actually launching some kind of offensive or doing anything in Moldova is slim to none in reality. So there really is no point in going in there and crushing them and then taking the ammo, because that'll probably take a large amount of Ukrainian soldiers away from other parts of the war. And who knows how long that would happen, and who's to say that the Russians there wouldn't end up blowing up the ammo to ensure that the Ukrainians would not be able to get it. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. I think that that's something they can do once the war is well in hand, which I think should be a little while in the future, maybe 8 months away. But I don't think that's something they should do right now at such a pivotal moment as this. So with that, I hope that does answer that last question. And we're now going to be moving on into our Chechen news, because I actually forgot we had a little bit in Chechnya. And we saw that the Bakhmut was training today. And I have to show y'all this, because the Bakhmut training is an oxymoron. And so here's the clip.
Адама
You
Кадырова
see this
одержала
guy
верх и над
firing a
следующей
machine gun,
группой.
firing an RPG. You see this guy shooting some targets. And he's shaking hands and, oh, he's getting jiggy with it. Oh!
Wait a minute, let me see that again.
Dude, he busting it down. What the hell?
Об итогах
What the
Oh,
hell?
damn.
Oh my god. Dude, and this guy wasn't even quick with that. Like, that was supposed to be impressive?
всей группой.
I mean, come on. Come on. I mean, like, anyone could do that. I mean, really, anyone could. At that range, with that kind of pistol, at that speed, anyone could do that. Why in the world are they acting like this guy just did something amazing? I mean, like, they're Chechens after all, so they can't aim, so anything like that's impressive, no matter how slow it is. But, oh my god, this man busted it down right afterwards. I mean, like, this man literally started getting jiggy with it. Let's watch that again. Oh, hit the gritty. Oh god.
Об итогах соревнований
Dear Lord,
Рамзану
put it
Кадырову
down.
рассказал заместитель начальника.
So then we move on to the gang of fetal alcohol syndrome sufferers, and we can see them all right here.
Адам Кадыров, который показал лучшую стрельбу из пистолета, а сегодняшние участники получат денежные призы. Рамзан Кадыров здесь
Oh
же
god,
что каждый инструктор
it's
получит
him.
денежные призы по
Darn.
500
And then here's a 14-year-old kid that's apparently in the Bakhmut. Great to know.
тысяч рублей. В заключении дня бойцы
Ham
сделали
sandwich.
фотографии с головой на память.
Ham and cheddar. And so that's the oh, he's rocking that Chairman Mao. We
What
got a
the
Chairman
hell is he
Mao up
wearing?
here. Oh my god, this man is about to do the great leap forward, but instead of leaping into millions, 100 million people dead from famine, he's going to be leaping right into Ukrainian artillery. But that is terrible drip, and those shoes don't fit. But anyways, had to show you all the Bakhmut in training just because it's funny. You know, there's no other reason to show that stuff rather than it is just humorous. We're now going to be moving on out of the Chechen news and finally back into our location unknowns, where we saw today a MTLB, a Ukrainian MTLB actually, with a dual 12.7 millimeter turret. We've actually seen these things in service with the Russian army for a good bit now, and we can now see the Ukrainians kind of making their own version of it. Which is interesting to see, that the Russians called themselves the second greatest army in the world, and they resorted to using APC technicals before the Ukrainians even did. And now we're seeing that they're also starting to make a few APC technicals. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and on to the next one, where we saw some US-supplied Mi-17s. The US actually had a number of Mi-17s in storage. We can see them overflight in Ukraine. See them flying over the forests right here. And really cool to see, and really neat to know that we actually had some Mi-17s to give Ukraine. I believe we ended up getting these Mi-17s from Central Africa at some point. We also ended up capturing an Mi-24 Hind from Central Africa at some point as well in the 80s. So great to know that those are now in Ukraine and having a second life. With that, we're now moving on into our Russian casualty report, which was high. High.
Oh, they got 4 again.
And let's see here. Well, oh, Torm!
It's a bobcat.
Dude, he put me in the picture.
Look at that.
Oh man, look at that. Look at that. I like that.
Oh,
I like
love
that.
it.
That was
love it.
hilarious. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. That was pretty good. All right, so let's see what the next ones are. Oh, we got Yena Star putting in a bobcat. We got
Nice.
Let's see. We got very stable putting in a bobcat.
Hey.
And that's it. That's it. Those are the only 3. Where did Melissa go?
Oh.
But anyways, moving on into the casualty report itself, the losses have been fairly good today as well. 470 Russian troops schwacked over the past 24 hours. That's right within the war's average. We also saw that 10 armored personnel carriers have also been destroyed over the past 24 hours. That's almost within the war's average. 16 supply trucks were also destroyed as well. Once again, a very good number, and Russian supplies keeps the front line running, so that is a very hard-felt loss for the Russians. We also saw that 8 main battle tanks were lost over the past 24 hours. That is actually several tanks above the war's average at this point. We also saw that 22 artillery pieces were wiped out over the past 24 hours as well. The counter battery is still proving to be quite strong. 10 drones were also shot down and destroyed. 1 MLRS was also destroyed on top of that. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems were also destroyed, and of course, those 4 special equipment vehicles. It has been a pretty decent day in terms of losses for the Russian army, and it appears that they are starting to rack up the losses, at least in the vehicular numbers, but it appears that the infantry losses are still staying within the war's average for the most part. We're now going to be moving on from that casualty report and on into our frontline news, because there is a decent amount of that as well, and most particularly in Bakhmut. Moving on into the Kreminna area, however, we did see some Russians getting hit by Ukrainian artillery in this part of the front line. Oh, we're going to mute that. But we can see the Ukrainian artillery slamming down some shells into the forests around Kreminna, right onto some Russian positions, and it appears that they are quite accurate. We can now see the Russian vehicle smoke, and of course smoking kills, listen to the general surgeon, and we can now see the tank continuing to blow up. Much like the shark Jaws said, blow up. Or was it the man?
That's what he's saying. No, it was a shark.
We see the tank continuing to burn, and that was quite an effective shot, taking out the tank in one hit.
Man, if the Russians don't be careful, they'll go get Jabberjaw on them.
Oh my god, Blitz. What is that thing? But anyways,
Did the shark have a name in that movie, or was it not? That was not Jabberjaw. It was a different one.
I don't know what that one was called, but it had like the exact same voice actor from the Three Stooges. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip. Great to see the Ukrainian artillery making sure to destroy more Russian forces. And we're now going to be moving on down to the front lines area near Vimka, where we saw a Russian tank destroyed at close range by a Ukrainian tank. We saw some tank-on-tank action today. This is very rare. We can see 2 tanks moving here on the horizon. We can see another 2 tanks down here. And so we can see what will be a showdown. We can also see one of the tanks being hit right there. It has a cope cage on top of it, confirming that those are the Russian tanks in the unit.
Bruce, that was the name of the shark. It wasn't called Jabberjaw.
But anyways,
Bruce.
yeah,
He's not going down with 4 barrels. Not 4, he's not.
Not with 3, not with 3, and then not with 4, and then I run out of barrels.
And then he got eaten.
And we can now see the tank roasting after it was hit, and another tank destroyed. You got to give it to the Ukrainian tankers for their accuracy as well, being able to destroy a $3.5 million Russian tank in a head-to-head fight. That's the end of the clip, and great to see. We're now going to be moving on to our next clip near Berestove, where we also saw a Russian Buk destroyed, and this loss was enough to make the Russian commanders in the area puke at the loss of it. We can see the Buk down there. It appears to have already fired a missile with only 2 on its upper rack. This thing carries around 3. And we can now see the upper rack exploding. The Buk, of course, going up with the rack. And I gotta say, that's a nice rack. Anyways, we can see it burning out white smoke from the vehicle, and it appears that the Buk is no more. Most likely not usable. We can now see the remains of the burned out Buk right there, confirming its destruction. We're now going to be moving on from the area of Berestove and further on down the lines into Bakhmut. We saw on the northern flank today that the 53rd continued to hit Russian positions in this part of the front and appeared to get some pretty positive results from this shelling. We can see some Russian positions here in the tree line. We can see them dropping a grenade into the dugout. It falls straight through the top, right into the bottom, and then blows it wide open. Very nice to see, letting us know that those Russians are not doing well. We can now see a Russian trench works here. It's a shoddily built trench works covered with garbage and other remnants. And we can see that they're clearing out this outpost as well. Oh my. We can now see them dropping another one right into the dugout. And Matthew, what do we say about that?
Jaga, jaga.
Igor! And we can see the outpost continuing to burn. I gotta tell you, man, when I do that, that actually vibrates my jaw. Like, it is so, like, strong. But anyways.
I think that's the sound waves.
I think that is. People fear me because I can get folks tinnitus with that crap. But anyways, we can see another Russian bunker being blown out. Tarp, of course, flying off into the wind. And we love to see it. It is great to see. We all love to see it. And we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news in the Bakhmut area and further on down towards Bakhmut City, where we saw a rare thermobaric RPG round being used by Ukrainian soldiers.
Події записані в Бахмуті.
And we can hear it right there. He actually said Bakhmut, so we know that this was in
І
Bakhmut.
бачимо орків. Мурчик продакшн. Дубль
We can now see the hero of the video walking outside with the thermobaric. And he's about to lay down the wow. Send it, baby!
Оркам пізда. Постріл!
And there it goes. Off into the sunset.
Патрони Мурчик. Бахмут.
And with that, that's the end of the clip. And it is great to see that they were able to get a thermobaric RPG round, kind of rare, and also were able to fire it as well. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news inside of Bakhmut City and now down into the southern flank, where we saw the 3rd Brigade continuing to attack Russian positions and exert a large amount of pressure onto the already waning Russian forces. Or I guess you could say fiending. Whoa! Whoa!
Yes.
We can see the M113 down there laying down fire onto those trench works as the Ukrainian infantry get up close and personal and make sure to say hello to the Russians. We can now see a tank blasting the trenches at point-blank range as they continue to give it the works. And no, this is not a Papa John's the works, which is a supreme pizza. This is the works Ukrainian style, wiping out Russian forces where they are.
The Ukrainians are putting in that work.
And we can now see them laying out smoke screens as they begin to withdraw from the area. And that's the end of the clip. But nice to see that they're still making sure to hit Russians nice and good. We're now going to be moving on behind the lines, where we also saw the Ukrainians were able to destroy Estrela, which is always nice to see. You see in the distance, right there, we can see a round explode in air. We can see our little Strela right there. We can see the next round hits right on top of the Strela, wiping it out. A Strela is nothing more than an anti-air system that is mounted onto an MTLB chassis, and so the armor is paper thin. Hitting it with an artillery shell directly, it will destroy it, and hitting it nearby will most likely heavily damage or destroy the system. And we can see artillery shells still coming down on this MTLB, and making sure to wipe it on out. Of course, it's a Strela, but it's an MTLB that's anti-air. We can now see our little Strela continuing to be slam dunked. Call these artillery shells Michael Jordan, because they are slam dunking this thing. We're now going to be moving on from that little video of the Strela being wiped out, and we're now going to be moving on to our last clip from the Bakhmut battlefield today, where we saw some Russians, well, a single Russian surrendering to Ukrainian forces in the area. We can see him with his hands up, walking through an open field towards where he believes Ukrainian forces are. And we can see the Ukrainians taking him prisoner right here. And with that, that's the end of the clip. And nice to see that they're able to get themselves another prisoner and another Russian wised up to what the war is really about and what would be the best thing for him. We're now going to be moving on down into the Donetsk area near Verkno-Turetsky, where we saw a Russian Ural was destroyed outright. Oh, we're going to mute that. We can see the Ural on the move down there. It's that small little amount of pixels that are black moving along that dirt road. We now see the Ural taking a stop, most likely for the driver to take a piss break, and he's about to really piss his pants when the shelling starts. And we now see the first shell landing. It appears that a decent amount of shrapnel will hit the Ural, because it's already starting to settle light with puffs of artillery smoke coming out of the back as the ammunition begins to explode back there. We now see the Ural 4320 going up into a burning roar as the Ural was taken out along with the ammunition it was carrying. Toasty. I remember that was pretty much
toasty.
that was pretty much one of the first jokes we ever said on this channel that I remember had a massive response, and it was during a short war summary. I said toasty, and everyone was like, "Yeah, that was hilarious," and I was like, "Oh, it's like folks like light talk, you know?" I was like, "Huh, interesting."
That light talk always goes over wonderful.
Man,
Crispy.
that light talk, you know what I mean? It's like a light tank.
Oh my.
Oh my. But we can see the Ural 4320 continuing to burn, and the drone was able to observe its destruction. Nice to see. Would you like your Ural?
Toasted or burnt?
Would you like your Ural with butter or toasted? Toasted, please. Okay. That just blows up
Man.
immediately.
I can't even believe it wasn't butter.
I cannot believe it's not butter. It's Russians. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on down into the Marinka area, where we saw a heavy battle being observed by a drone in the area today. We hear music playing, which
Oh,
means
that's about to be a sick beat.
uh-huh.
You know, the pan flute starts out or the whistling starts, it's about to, the beat's about to drop.
But anyways, we can see the battle occurring inside of Marinka right here. And we can see tracer fire moving all around. We can see mortars landing. We can see the tracer landing back onto the ground after it ricocheted off of something in the distance. It is quite an intense battle. We can also see what appears to be some kind of a vehicle moving through the field right there, although we really can't tell what kind it is or whose vehicle it is.
I can hear the music, by the way.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
How in the world can you hear it? There we go. It's completely muted now. We see tracers flying through the air up there. We see artillery exploding all over. Of course, a very large battle occurring for Marinka. And the drone's just casually flying over as we watch a whole battle occur below it, and the destroyed remains of Marinka.
What is is it picking up the fire? Like the shells and stuff? Why is it popping up red like it's detecting an obstacle?
I think it is. It's like a video game thing. It's like pretty much showing you where the fire is coming from. That's weird.
It's kind of wild.
Yeah, I don't know how in the world it's doing that. Huh. That is weird.
Maybe it's having a malfunction or something. Surely it's not picking it up that far away.
We can now see the artillery exploding inside of Marinka again. And I gotta tell you, man, passing the $1 million mark has brought out the bots in spades tonight. I mean, like, it is crazy.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, man.
This drone's like flying sideways.
Man, look at this, man. This thing's just going down to the battle. Let me get a closer look. Literally just going into the middle of the battle itself. And we can see the Russian tanks right there firing at the town. But the Ukrainian garrison inside of Marinka is still holding strong. We can see what appears an ATGM being fired across one street to the next. We now see the rounds still continuing to explode inside the city as the battle continues. And so with that, That's the end of the clip, but very interesting to see the battle continuing to unfold in Marinka in far greater intensity than it has been in other times before. We're now going to be moving on down into the Zaporizhzhia front, where we saw in the area of battl.e, a Russian tank cooking on up. This is kind of in the area, actually, where we believe that the counteroffensive is happening, in the southern front in general. Beyond that, I can't really say much because it is an operational security issue right now. But I do want y'all to know that from what we've heard and what the initial reports are, the counteroffensive is underway right now. And so with that, here's a clip of a Russian tank burning near Novodorivka. When you see Novodorivka right there, see the clip that's about to be shown. Oh, wait a minute, this actually located a clip from earlier that we showed of a Russian tank being destroyed. Well, that's good to know. We actually found specifically where it was. Nice. Nice. Let's put it out onto a tray. Nice hands. But anyways, we're going to be cutting that video short because y'all have seen it already, and we're now going to be moving on from that area and on into the area of Bakhmut, where we saw a KH-22 had slammed into a field and left a massive crater that Ukrainian forces then later observed on video. That's quite a large crater from a KH-22.
Правда?
Кажу, балістична, бо два сопла, блядь. Я понял, ота крилата приїхала.
Їбать, тут це турбіни стоять. Оце турбіни.
Наганяють воздух.
And we can see some of the remains of this KH-22 missile that exploded in this area.
Тут не поможе взагалі нічого.
А перевернути її можна чи ні?
Не трогай, нахуй тобі треба. На, подивись.
Це зовсім не цікаво. Воно клас, мав би бути.
Ні, там бачиш якийсь. Отака ямка собі. 10 метрів глибиною.
And with that, that's the end of that clip, but once again showing the devastating firepower of one of those KH-22 missiles, luckily not slamming into a city, but into the middle of a field in the Zaporizhzhia oblast. We're now going to be moving on down towards the area of Robotine, where we saw another Russian tank being hit by the 44th Artillery. Oh, we're going to mute. Have you ever wanted to see a Russian tank?
Yep, that was Sam Elliott music.
Right? Well, you're in luck, my friend. Introducing the all-new Russian Tank Smacker 9000. Watch that tank get smacked into a firing ball of fury. Watch that thing start to burn with the Russian crew inside. Call it a toaster, because that thing be toasting them up nice and good. Meat comes right off the bone. Watch as the tank continues to burn inside the tree line, letting us know that $3.5 million of tank has been completely destroyed. Watch as they do it again, and the Russians are in complete dismay as to how they were able to do it. Sam! Sam! What you doing that voice impersonation for, Sam? But anyways, we see them getting a Russian ammo depot as well. And really nice to see. And you know what we say, Matthew? We love to see it, love to see it. We see another Russian tank also getting taken out as well. Right there. Juicy. See another tank. Another one. Another one.
Another one.
Another one. We love to see it. And so with that, that's the
That DJ guy would be going crazy right now if he was like commentating on this war. Another one. Another one. I can't take it.
DJ Khaled! But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from the southern front area and on down into Crimea, actually, because we actually saw that a TV in Crimea was hacked today, and they were playing the video that I didn't show tonight, actually, unfortunately. But here's part of it. Hush, everyone, hush. Then we see the video starting over again where they do the whole little finger thing, the hush thing, because, you know, you're not supposed to be talking about what's going on down there. And we're making sure to stay within the good graces of operational security by not talking about specific details of the counteroffensive. All I'm saying is that's happening in the southern front, and that's it. We're now going to be moving on up into the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, where he personally talks to some of those soldiers that are currently conducting that offensive individually and wishes them an incredibly successful offensive, but of course also makes note of the higher losses that will be taken during this offensive. Without further ado, here is the address from President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Big speech.
Big speech, a massive one.
Дорогі українці і українки, вже завершилась рятувальна операція в місті Підгородне на Дніпровщині, де російська ракета зруйнувала будинки. 25 людей отримали поранення, з них 5 діти. Давид, йому 6 років, тяжкий стан, хлопець госпіталізований. Денис, йому 11 років, теж тяжкий стан, госпіталізований. Олександр, 15 років, теж тяжкий стан. Ліза, 17 років, лікування амбулаторне. Кіра, їй 10 років, мінно-вибухова травма, лікування амбулаторне. Боляче бачити такі звіти. Ліза 2 роки, дівчинці. Вона була вбита цією російською ракетою, ймовірно, Іскандер. Мої співчуття рідним і близьким. Російський терор забрав життя сотень наших дітей, і лише за час від 24 лютого, за час повномасштабної війни, достеменно відомо про загибель 485 діточок. Це число, яке ми можемо офіційно підтвердити, знаючи дані кожної дитини. На жаль, справжнє число більше. Щоразу, коли ми звільняємо нашу землю від російських окупантів, ми дізнаємося страшну правду про окупацію. Про те, скільки людей, скільки дітей в похованнях на окупованій території, в могилах цієї війни, цієї агресії, і скільки ще досі під руїнами у спалених Росією українських містах і селах. Поки що, на жаль, не маємо повної інформації про сотні тисяч дітей, які були депортовані в Росію. Станом на сьогодні, завдяки різним зусиллям, вдалося повернути в Україну 371 дитину із депортації. При тому, що нам достеменно відомо принаймні про 19 505 депортованих українських дітей. І це лише частина від усіх тих наших маленьких українців і українок, які досі у ворога, яких ми усіх маємо повернути. Сьогодні в нашій державі День пам'яті дітей, які загинули внаслідок російської агресії ще з 2014 року. Дітей, які були би живі, якби купка бандитів в Кремлі, в Москві не відчула себе вождями, які нібито мають право вершити долю народів. Кожен із цих бандитів буде засуджений, і я не сумніваюся в цьому. На цей результат працюють всі необхідні правові інституції. І сьогодні у цей день, у День пам'яті, я хочу подякувати усім в світі, хто підтримує наші зусилля заради справедливості, заради покарання кожного, хто приніс на нашу землю терор, кожного, хто вбиває і депортує дітей та дорослих. Я вдячний усім в світі, хто допомагає роботі Міжнародного кримінального суду, його команді в розслідуванні російських злочинів на українській землі, і хто допомагає нам організувати спеціальний трибунал щодо злочину агресії Росії проти України, щодо того первісного злочину, який породив усі інші страшні злочини цієї війни. Нехай вироки щодо рашистів, які вони одного дня почують на лаві підсудних, законні та справедливі вироки, будуть свідченням того, що світ все ж таки берегтиме життя, берегтиме цивілізованість. І що все ж таки настане той час, коли діти на землі, в Україні та будь-де ще будуть захищені від такого зла, як російське зло, і від таких агресій. Ось чому так важливо, щоб сила справедливості, сила відповідальності була потужною згадкою про кожне життя, яке було забране злом, Росією. І частиною цієї відповідальності, обов'язковою частиною, на сьогодні є санкції. Санкції світу, які змушують Росію платити ціну за те, що вона робить. Санкції, які мають обмежувати російську здатність до терору по максимуму. Сьогодні провів спеціальну нараду щодо санкцій. ГУР, Служба зовнішньої розвідки, уряд, офіс. Дуже детально проаналізували, як Росія обходить санкції та хто їй допомагає. Різні країни, різні компанії, без яких Росія не змогла би виробляти засоби терору, зокрема ракети. На жаль, державі-терористу вдається використовувати технології світу через мережу постачальників. Вдається обходити міжнародні санкції, міжнародні санкційні режими. Ми бачимо кожен напрямок обходу наявних санкцій, кожну країну, чия територія або юрисдикція, чиї громадяни використовуються Росією для продовження терору. І ми маємо закрити всі такі напрямки разом з партнерами, щоб не було в російських ракетах, в російської зброї продукції вільного світу. Необхідні кроки будуть. Я дякую усім, хто допомагає нам боротись зі злом агресії. Слава усім нашим воїнам і дякую за сьогоднішній день на передовій. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And Slava Ukraini. And that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on the 466th day of the war. And usually, y'all may have noticed that we usually don't give a rounding out to our news segment anymore. We just jump straight from our news segment into our question segment. But I would like to take this moment in between the switch from news to questions to thank everyone again for being a part of tonight's stream. There was 7,000 of y'all on at the peak, way early on in the stream. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all for being a part of channel history tonight. Not only has this channel become the first to raise $1 million, it will always be the one that goes down in YouTube history as having raised $1 million for YouTube Give. It is unbelievable to think that our entire combined efforts of the Lee Spring Army have managed to produce such a result that no other channel has been able to get close to, except for only one, and they have 130 million subscribers. No other channel has gotten that close. And it's unbelievable to think that it's thanks to all of y'all. It's thanks to folks like Jeff Lieberman, Uncle Grandpa, Leanna, Friendly Reminder, Scott Mincing, George Magdaleno, Angry Penguin, Rangers Rule, Fethdar, David L., who just threw in 50, actually, Twice Upon a Time, Vitali, OZ Klocka, also known as OZ Jeff Gray back in the day, actually, Surprisatus, Fate Russet, Shy, ABCD, everyone. It's every single one of y'all that has made a massive difference tonight. And I'm just reading y'all out of the live chat right now. But there are countless hundreds of y'all, thousands of y'all actually, every single one of y'all had a part in making $1 million raised over all of these fundraisers possible. Every single one of y'all did. And even folks who are not here with us tonight. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for being a part of such a amazing and historical day as a part of this channel, and also a day that we can all look back on with pride. Not only did we pass $1 million raised, but we have raised nearly $32,000 just tonight. And separating tonight from every other fundraiser, and not considering that that is $1 million cumulative that we've raised over all of our fundraisers, and just looking at $32,000 raised tonight, that is a point of pride. Through $32,000, Razom for Ukraine will be able to do countless things with $32,000, paying for surgeries, getting medical aid and support and medical equipment to the front lines or to medical facilities, helping soldiers to go to college, among many other things, among even helping to lobby U.S. officials to continue support for the war. They do countless things. And it is unbelievable to think that all of y'all have been able to help out in such a massive degree with that tonight. And I don't think that there's any other group, any other community on YouTube that can truly look at the name of their community with pride and know that behind it stands the hopes and ambitions, dreams, and the kindness of thousands of people who have helped to make this community what it is today. The Lee Spring Army is known throughout the Ukraine war world, throughout really the entirety of YouTube, to the point that even when I'm taking a break from running this channel and I'm playing video games like Hell Let Loose, people hear me and they go, oh my god, you're the enforcer, and they talk about the amazing things that the Lee Spring Army has done and all of the amazing things that y'all have done. There is no other community out there that can call themselves the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, thank you to every single one of y'all who helped out with this fundraiser tonight and for the rest of the night. In thanks of everything that y'all have done, we're going to be calling off all of the top donors in between the last time we called them out and this time, and then we'll also be getting into questions that some of y'all have sent in. Tonight is a live chat question night. There are no super chats that we have to answer first, and so if you throw a question into the live chat, it's immediately put in the spreadsheet and has a pretty high likelihood of being answered before we round out tonight's stream. And so with that, thank you all once again for being a part of this fundraiser tonight as we move on into this question segment. And with that, take it away, Matthew.
All right, so for our final question segment, we have to call out our top donors since the last time. And also, real quick, let me make sure. Yep, just want to make sure I didn't see a troll there. And our very first top donation since the last time we called them out is from Activista, who put in a $100 donation. We also have a 100 from G. Duff. We also have a 50 from Fred Flintstone. He comes down from the town. Forgot the name. What was the town called?
Bedrock.
In that thing? Bedrock. Well, that was somewhat of a fail, but thank you, Fred, very much. Thanks to Wilma. And up next, we have a 50 from Miranda Nelson, as well as a 50 from Bob P. We have a 69 from Vitaly. Nice. In honor of PsyOps. And we also have a 50 from David L. while I stutter my way through that, and a 50 from Gene Kustra. And once again, big thanks to you all. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to thank everyone that we also just called out right there once again for helping out this fundraiser, because every little bit counts. Folks who throw in $1 to this fundraiser, because I've seen several $1 donations tonight, sometimes that's all that folks can do is $1. And sadly, we can't call everyone out who sends in $1 and $5 because there are countless hundreds of y'all, and we would never get done calling out everyone who's supported that way. But I got to thank everyone we just called out and everyone we are not able to call out for making this possible tonight. And I truly mean it. Every single little dollar counts. And if you throw in a $1 donation, if another 100 people throw that in, that's $100 towards the fundraiser. It's a massive impact and it's a massive help, especially to the folks who rely on Razom for Ukraine for support. And I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much once again for helping this fundraiser to be possible tonight and helping us to finally say that the Lee Spring Army has passed $1 million raised over the entirety of the war. It is, and I once again have to remind everyone, that is an honor that no other channel has, and that is an honor no one can take from y'all. $1 million raised, each and every single one of y'all, whether y'all donated or not, holds claim to that credit. Folks who hit the like button and help this channel to be promoted to people who may have not ever seen this channel before and then watched it and donated to these fundraisers, y'all deserve credit for what has been done tonight. The folks who comment in the live chat, who are just here and watch for fun and have never supported a fundraiser, y'all also help as well, because just leaving comments in the live chat and having the live chat move at 1,000,000 miles per hour also helps in this stream and this channel being promoted to more people and more people who may support these fundraisers. The folks who've clicked the subscribe button and have shown that the Lee Spring Army is nearly reaching 121,000 in size. Y'all have had a massive impact on these fundraisers as well, because y'all have made this community seem to be an incredibly well-founded, strong, and large community that folks can join. The folks who have actually helped out with these fundraisers are, of course, one of the most important and massive parts of what has made these fundraiser nights possible. All of y'all who have sacrificed y'all's hard-earned dollars to these fundraisers through YouTube Give to help out people y'all have never met that are thousands of miles away from y'all and may as well mean a hill of beans of difference to really any of y'all in y'all's personal lives. Y'all's generosity and hearts of gold have certainly stood out and have saved the lives of people in Ukraine that will never know y'all's names, but will know the actions and deeds that y'all were able to commit over 466 days of this war and all of the remaining days that this war will go on. Y'all are amazing, truly incredible. I'm actually getting myself teared up over here giving this speech to y'all, and I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for making everything that has been possible over 466 days able to happen. And so with that, before I get myself teared up, we're going to be moving on into the polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we have 4 polls to address. And our very first one says, the U.S. says that Ukraine will retake significant territory in the counteroffensive, but the war will end up ultimately solved with diplomacy. And what are your thoughts? 39% said I agree with the U.S. analysis, 11% said unsure, 28% said, I partially agree with that, and 22% said, I disagree with the U.S. analysis. And I will say I fall within the 28%. I certainly do believe that Ukraine will retake significant strategic territory in this counteroffensive, but I'm unsure about the diplomacy part. It seems at the moment Russia is not willing to give any on the negotiation aspect, and unless something drastically changes, that probably won't be the case, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't think this is going to force them to the negotiating table yet, but it's certainly going to start moving them towards really having no holdings in Ukraine, where they will eventually go to the negotiating table. So I don't think it's going to happen now, but I think that this will certainly be moving in the right direction to where those negotiations begin then. And so with that, I hope that does address that one fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says many Ukrainian recruits for the offensive say, quote unquote, and also this is a little bit disturbing slightly, but they said we're going to die probably, but they enlist anyway. And what are your thoughts? 76% said that's unprecedented bravery and warriors. 8% said unsure, and 16% said that's a bad mindset to adopt. And on this one, I'm going to fall very wholeheartedly within the 76%. You rarely ever see, and throughout the world, unprecedented bravery quite like that. These people know going in that there are probably going to be losses. Some people may not come back, but they are so dedicated to their country and patriotic, they're willing to sacrifice their own lives to make sure that their families, their children, their mothers and fathers are able to live on in their own country free from Russian tyranny. That is extremely laudable. And I think very highly of it. And I really do admire the Ukrainians for their unprecedented and unwavering bravery. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it is incredibly inspiring to hear that brave young men and women in Ukraine will gladly lay down their lives in the defense of their nation. Many people don't have mindsets like that, and it's been a constant throughout history that most people do not have a mindset like that. And that kind of selflessness, to give up one's life in the hopes that others may live, is something that is looked back on upon the stories of history as people who are heroes. And those people are put down in history and remembered by the folks who were affected by their sacrifice for the rest of all eternity, like the liquidators at Chernobyl, or those brave folks, the elderly who volunteered to clean up the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, or even the folks here in the United States that would end up laying down their lives in the support of causes around the world, whether it be fighting against Nazism in the Second World War, or helping to avenge the lives lost on the Lusitania in the First World War, or even the perceived wrongdoings by the British in the American Revolutionary War. There are many great people and brave, selfless souls that have given up their lives in defense of something greater than them, and it is amazing to hear that Ukrainian I guess you could say younger people are more than happy to sign up and to continue to defend their country, very well knowing the dangers that lie ahead and the chance that they may never return home to relish in the victory that they would have achieved. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says dissident Russian soldiers say they will hand over captured Russian soldiers to Ukraine. And what are your thoughts? 50% said it indirectly proves cooperation, 18% said unsure, and 32% said it proves nothing, take an L Russia. And on this one, I'm going to somewhat fall in the unsure category. There's a part of me that wants to say there is some cooperation going on. Very clearly, if they're handing over prisoners, there's some level of cooperation. But I mean a little bit more deeper than that, maybe a more direct form of cooperation, if you know what I mean. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's interesting to hear that they would offer to do something like that. I don't know how successful that would be, but I have a feeling it would probably be more successful than the Ukrainians asking Russians to surrender or to hand them over. I have a feeling that the Russians doing it themselves to other Russians and trying to persuade them to defect would probably be a little bit more effective. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says documents have emerged allegedly proving Iran arms shipments to Russia, and it serves as proof of involvement. And what are your thoughts? 73% said no proof required, we knew it. 2% said unsure. 6% said I'm indifferent, it's old news. And 19% said that's good for documentation. And for me, I'm going to fall into 73%. I personally did not require that proof to know that Iran is supporting Russia. They made that clear that they're supporting them. And we also know that they're shipping arms to them because it's one of the main supporters of the war on the Russian side is Iran. And they are perpetrating war crimes in essence. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's not shocking to me at all, considering we've seen Iranian drones and equipment being used in Russia for quite some while, that the Iranians would be supporting the Russians. That's nothing really new, and we didn't really need that information to confirm that, because we already saw their weapons there, which shows that they are supporting them in some way. But it is good for documentation purposes, because now we have official proof that the Iranians are, of course, supporting the Russians, and I think that that should be enough to start imposing even further sanctions on Iran, or to go down there and stomp them, one or the other. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, that was our last poll. So we're moving on to our live chat questions, but first, I want to give a shout out to Pepper UAV, who put in a $50 donation and brought us up to $32,143 of the $22,000 goal. Tremendous. I can do that math. That's 10,000, almost approximately, above the goal.
That is actually about 9,300, I think, above the goal.
Oh, come on.
Come on, man. I was sitting there, I was like, well, we're almost 10,000 above the goal. And that's still unbelievable, really. I mean, it really just reaching the goal was unbelievable to me. I didn't think we'd reach it in 30 minutes. I didn't think we'd get this far past the goal, even still. Like, that's all new to me. Like, I never thought that would happen. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and let's get on into that next question.
All right, so while I grab one more thing from the live chat here, our first live chat question is going to go to Leonce Pierre Chevalier, who says, did you guys hear about the huge Russian convoy that got wiped off the face of the map? Over 10 tanks and 200 taking nap.
I didn't actually. So unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that one, because I haven't heard about the Russians taking those kinds of monumental losses, but we have seen them taking higher losses nonetheless. So with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Greg Lankus, who says, how many troops do you think Ukraine is going to use in the offensive?
Most likely somewhere in the tens of thousands. I would assume maybe 40 to 50,000 will be involved in an offensive, and there will probably be a large amount of armored support in that as well. But, of course, we don't want to get into exact details. I don't really know the exact details of their force composition during this counterattack, but, we'll probably find out later. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And real quick, a shout out to James Roberts, who put in a $100 donation to Razom for Ukraine, and a big ol'
and I gotta say, we were up to 32,293. And so with that, we're on to the next.
All right, and our next question goes to David Huss, who says, thoughts for Prigozhin to strike deal with Russia Legion for Wagner to fight with them to march on Moscow, allowing him to replace Putin.
I would be very iffy about that, because I have a feeling that as quickly as Prigozhin would backstab the Russian government, he would probably as quickly backstab the Russian Liberation Army as well. But at least in the short term, that would benefit the RLA and their aims. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Keymaster, who says, is this breakaway unit attacking Russia the diversion for the counteroffensive?
It looks like it was, and it looks like they're going to hold up there for so long and continue pushing forward that it will start to divide the Russians' attention into two separate areas, and they'll have to decide what's more important, keeping territory in Ukraine or keeping Russia. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Bradley Barrows, who puts in a $50 donation to the fundraiser. 32,343 is the new total. Thank you once again. And up next, we have a question from CA Lags, who says, which faction do you think can be trusted with the Russian nukes if Russia breaks up?
I don't think there is a specific faction I would say would be trusted. I would say the largest faction would probably be the most stable, and therefore they should probably inherit the nukes. But at the same time, I really wouldn't want any of them to have nukes. Honestly, I think that would be a great excuse to start denuclearizing them, and say that they're so unstable they can't really maintain the nukes. And on top of that, a lot of those countries would probably be in a situation that Ukraine was in the 90s, where they're so poor they can't possibly maintain the nukes anyways, and they also can't risk sanctions, and so they probably voluntarily give them up for disarmament anyways. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Machine Gun Jack. And he says, is the Russian Liberation Army recruiting in the oblast that they've invaded, and how do they vet people?
I believe they are recruiting, the RLA is. I don't really know how they do the vetting side of things, though. I think it's just anyone who wants to join joins. I think that's how it works. But we don't really know a lot about the recruiting tactics inside of occupied territory. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Fighting Finn, who says, do you think the new Storm Shadow missiles could take out the Crimean Bridge?
Certainly. No doubt about it. They would be able to take out the Crimean Bridge if anything could. And so with that, I hope that does address that one fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Duncan VR. And he says, question. And he even puts in the animal noises in the live chat. He says, question, Baba. Would Ukraine win the war quicker with F-35 BS? How would a squadron of F-35 BS go against the Russian MiGs and the Black Sea Russian fleet?
So Russian MiGs and the Black Sea Fleet would pretty much be helpless against F-35s. There's really no way for them to counter these stealth abilities of the F-35. The only way that they would be able to see an F-35 and shoot it down is if it has external pylons mounted onto it, which it would probably have in an anti-ship role, although still that would be pretty difficult for the Russians to intercept. So in terms of air superiority, the F-35s would win hands down. In terms of anti-ship abilities, it would be a little bit tougher than securing air superiority, but they probably would be able to destroy the Russian Navy fairly handily, probably only taking one F-35 as a loss, or maybe even taking no F-35s as a loss. But I would say they would probably be able to do that quite easily, considering that the F-35 pretty much gaps anything the Russians have. There's no way they could get close to the abilities of the F-35, especially a MiG-29 or an Su-27 going up against one of those. It is a fight that could never be won by an Su-27 or a MiG-29 because they'd never even be able to physically see the F-35 on radar to be able to engage it in normal air-to-air combat. And considering, to go through a little bit of air combat and what modern air combat's like, modern air combat occurs at distances that are so far away you visually can't really see the aircraft you're fighting. And so without being able to see them on radar, you're pretty much blind to that thing even existing in the area, unless if there's a visible contrail coming out of the back of the engine because it's so high up. Or if you see the glint of the sun coming off of that aircraft, you're probably not going to see it. So an Su-27 would never be able to visually spot the F-35 for the most part to be able to engage it and shoot it down. On the other hand, the F-35 would be able to pick it up on its radar and then be able to shoot it down. So the F-35 would win almost every single time, practically every time. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well because it would be a hands-down victory for the F-35s. But I still don't think we should send those to Ukraine because they are brand new in terms of military terms and military time. They're brand spanking new, and so having the possibility of a Russian spy getting an up close look at one of those things, or possibly having one destroyed and then the Russians start coming through the parts, that could start to pose a massive national security risk for the United States. And that's why we spend big bucks. We spend big bucks to have those advantages over the rest of the world. And so sending those aircraft over to Ukraine where we possibly lose that big buck advantage, that could start to pose a big risk for us going forward. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to BC Skyman, who says, Matt, where are the Russian volunteers getting their weapons? And are there any weapons from the U.S.? My wife is worried that this can give them an excuse to use a nuke against Ukraine.
The Russian volunteers, the Russian Liberation Army, the RLA, appears to be armed entirely by Ukraine because they're using American-supplied vehicles, which the Ukrainians received, and then it appears they gave them on to the Russian Liberation Army. So pretty much everything they're getting, they're being supplied by Ukraine with. But kind of like how the Ukrainians couldn't take direct action against Russia in 2014 due to the Donbass conflict because the Russians weren't directly involved, it's kind of a similar situation here for the Russians. Because while they certainly are supplied by Ukraine, and they're obviously affiliated with Ukraine, they are Russian nationals after all, and they're technically Russian citizenry. So they can't really attack the Ukrainians, at least, on a level footing, and say that they were responsible for that because it is largely looked at on a diplomatic phase or a political phase as a largely internal affair, although they were obviously supplied from Ukraine. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I would say that's nothing really to be too worried about because it appears that the Russians can't really do anything right now. Their hands are tied. They're not directly attacking Ukraine because of that. And also, they can't even really push the Russian Liberation Army back either. And they would probably want to push the Russian Liberation Army back before they started taking any extremely drastic actions. And so with that, Hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to AF Kaplan, who says, regarding Polish involvement in the RLA, has NATO voiced any concerns or objections? And quote unquote, Poland is a NATO member.
We haven't heard of any objections being voiced to the Polish RDK members. It appears that no one's really talking about them all too much, but I did think it was interesting to note that because it does show that it's not just Russian nationals that are involved. It is a multinational force for the large part. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Trister1, who says, how do you think the Polish Legion soldiers affects the politics with the West and NATO?
They largely would not, because Poland will probably deny those people being Polish citizens, which is kind of an interesting move, because back when a little thing happened in Venezuela when some guys just dropped themselves off on boats on the coast of Venezuela, and then they were captured with U.S. passports and everything. The United States denied ever knowing those people or them being citizens, and that's kind of a normal move, is that if one of them was, for example, captured or killed and the Russians found like a Polish passport on them or something like that, Poland would probably deny the person even being a Polish citizen, and they would also say that they were not operating on the bequest of the Polish government or in any capacity representing Poland as a nation. So it probably wouldn't really come back to bite the West that much, considering that these people are pretty much free agents operating entirely on their own, completely detached from their own country. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from how I would understand it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Pikus, who says, will a Ukrainian victory in the war be followed by an overhaul to the country's constitution? And if so, will the Enforcer channel continue to report on events in Ukraine during peacetime?
I think we were probably not, to be honest, because once peacetime comes back, what our whole purpose of being here was kind of over for, because we're here to cover the war and also to try and help save folks over there through the fundraisers like we're running tonight. And once the war ends, and I got to be honest about this as well, a lot of people are going to lose interest practically immediately. Not a lot of people like to hang out for the after effects of war, like, for example, like World War I, or really when any war is over, veterans come home, they're extremely wounded, they can't get jobs, no one really helps them, the war is over, who cares about those guys anymore? That's really like the public mindset about that kind of stuff. And it's unfortunate, but it's reality. And so I think that we probably wouldn't end up covering it because probably a lot of people wouldn't even care at that point. And on top of that, the whole purpose I'm here for, which is to support Ukraine during the war, that would largely be over too. And we would hopefully want to move on to other things. We may move on to covering news kind of like a normal news channel, really covering anything and everything, but making sure, as usual, like this channel has always run, to cover it in an unbiased way. Although I will say we are obviously pro-Ukrainian, but that's the only bias we have. We would try and cover everything else kind of that way and try and flesh this thing out into a full-on news channel, or maybe a history channel, or a gun review channel, or really a mix of all of those things, and make separate offshoot channels for that kind of stuff. But we probably wouldn't end up covering it for that long after the war was over. It'd probably be maybe a month, and then we would probably finally round that out, because this war has been dreadful. And I've got to be honest, it is pretty rough to mentally deal with watching people get killed, because y'all don't really see that a lot because I've filtered that out from our news. But it is really rough to go through every single night and watch some people get killed in gruesome ways. And I'd honestly want to, just move on from it once it's over, instead of kind of, lingering around on it, because it's pretty tough to deal with behind the scenes. And sometimes you see people get killed in such gruesome ways, you think about it every once in a while. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Cindy Mitchell, who says, just a thought. I wonder how Russian troops feel about their leaders using deadly phosphorus on maybe even family members, let alone on their countrymen.
It appears that those Russian soldiers were completely unfazed by that. It appears they were just joking and laughing through it, knowing that there were probably Russian citizens on the receiving end of that barrage. So I would say, really, it appears that they're kind of callous and they don't even really care, at least from that one video. That's what we could tell. It may be different across the entirety of the Russian population. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Deeds Millar, who says, is it possible that there is a delay of the fighter jets?
It may be possible that there's a slight delay of the fighter jets. From what we know right now, it is carrying on schedule, and they should be arriving in Ukraine sometime around October, at least at the earliest. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, I want to clarify this because I see some people who may have misunderstood my statement earlier. We will, of course, continue to cover this news as the war keeps going. But once the war ends, once there is an actual peace treaty that is made in between Ukraine and Russia, we'll probably not be running nightly streams like this for that much longer after that's over. Because, you know, it's really the end. You know, we could keep on covering it, but people will eventually just start to lose focus on it. And, you know, we'll just keep on trying to, honestly, we'll, at that point, it'll be like we're trying to ride a wave that isn't really there. And I don't want to be, I don't want to do something where we like beat a dead horse, you know, all day and all night, because we're here for the war. We're here to support Ukraine during that. We're here to help save lives. And once they get through this massive obstacle, we would probably want to move on. And I mean, you know, and I'm saying it from my personal standpoint because Matthew may be fine with it. Me personally, like it is sometimes really tough, especially doing this for 466 days, to watch people get killed. And it was really tough at the start, and then I got kind of numb to it. And then watching them get killed even 466 days later, Ukrainians, Russians, and everyone. Honestly, it is pretty tough to watch, you know, behind the scenes, because, you know, they're folks, they're real people, and you're watching this constantly. And I could honestly recall maybe at least a few hundred people getting killed in specific ways where I sit there and I'm like, man, that is messed up. And I can actually recall the video and what it looked like. You know, of course, we never show that kind of stuff on stream. One, because YouTube wouldn't allow it. And two, that's a little too gruesome to show. But it's something that makes me think, man, when this war is over, I'll be glad that it's over. And I won't really want to like hang out on it a lot or try and like trump that up, you know, too much after it's over. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
All right, and the next question goes to Super Action General, who says, assuming the offensive breaks through all the defense lines, how long would it take for them to reach Melitopol and the border with Crimea? Will it be days or hours?
I would say probably to reach Melitopol, it would take around 4 days. If they were unopposed all the way to Crimea, I would say maybe 2 weeks, 14 days or so. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, just for me, when this war is over, I would personally like to go actually to Ukraine and document some of the recovery efforts on the ground. Of course, we'll be in law school then, but we will have time on the side, hopefully, to be able to do things like that. That's really my objective after the war is over, because there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in Ukraine that will be very newsworthy. But I'm not sure if the enforcer agrees or not.
Well, I mean, like we'll probably go over to Ukraine, but of course we won't be like, you know, Vice News was in 2014, you know, where we're just over there all the time reporting on it, because we would be in law school and stuff. But I would probably go over there after the war, and we would probably film that, and then, you know, we would have to kind of decide from there where we would go as far as the Ukraine stuff. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next question goes to Loren Natsky, who says, what have you guys heard about Ukraine asking the Aussies for their M1A1 tanks they are looking to get rid of soon because of their M1A2 order coming in 2014?
It actually appears that the Ukrainians haven't really talked to the Australians much about that, at least as far as documented information I have goes. It appears that that's just completely being unmentioned by either the Australians as an offer or by the Ukrainians as a request. So at the moment, it appears that those Abrams have no home, and they'll most likely just be retired and maybe returned to the United States at this point. And so with that, hope that does address that one fairly well. And also, Matthew, how many questions do we have left?
We have about 8.
All right, and so I was actually wondering, because we're going to answer all of them tonight. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to N. Hansen, who says, experts are surprised that Prigozhin is still alive. How long do you give him?
I would say, I don't know. Because they're trying to find like a second use for him right now, it seems, by moving them to the Belgorod area. But we don't see that happening. And honestly, with that removed out of the equation, I'd say maybe a half year you'll survive, and then they'll assassinate him or something similar. Or they may wait until the war is over and then assassinate him, so he's kind of out of the limelight. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mr. Diggs, who says, don't you think the AFU has set point of achievement for the offensive to hold equipment How does that work for regular, normal military movements historically?
And hold equipment, what do you take that as, Matthew, when he said to hold equipment?
I guess it means not to lose any resources like maybe the Patriots and the artillery and things like that.
I would say that's probably going to slow them down a little bit, because that means they're going to be advancing more cautiously. If we're understanding that correctly, they'll be advancing more cautiously and trying to conserve their losses in manpower. So that means that their offensive would end up being slower. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And if that was the case, it would probably take more time. So instead of reaching Melitopol in 3 days, they may reach it in 5 or 6 or a week. But at the same time, that would also be giving them a great disadvantage in an offensive, because the slower that they move, even if it means they're taking less losses, that gives the Russians more time to react to whatever the Ukrainians are doing next. So they would be wise to do that to conserve losses, but it would also be unwise to do in an attempt to try and make a massive swath of ground. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, give the pros and cons of that kind of decision. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Next we have a question from Rank End Filer, who says, what are the chances of a nuclear power plant disaster, whether by mistake or terror, excuse me.
Terror.
That's got a little southern there for a second.
We're not going to stand for these acts of terror. But anyways, to answer that question, I'd say the chances are honestly low. While the Russians mismanaged the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant a great deal, I don't think it's to the point that it'll be a nuclear disaster. So we won't be seeing any acts of terror coming from that nuclear power plant. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Richie MC, who says, will the Russians eventually lose in Ukraine and destroy BRICS?
I believe that they will not destroy BRICS. I think BRICS will probably still exist. It's really a loose economic alliance, because look at India and China, which are both a part of BRICS, and they are not on good terms with each other, and that shows you how loose of an economic alliance BRICS is. So I would say that they're not going to end up destroying BRICS, but if they lose the war, it'll probably start to impact the future of BRICS greatly, and they may really just be an honorary member of BRICS at that point, because, who would really care about them being a part of it at that point? But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mark, General of the LSA. He says, what would you define as minimum success goal for the counterattack? For my view, it's breaking the land bridge in a sustained way, which allows them to push east and west.
The minimum goal would be to make it to Tokmak. From, around, the front lines around Huilopol right now in Arikiv. So to make it towards Tokmak, I would say that would probably be the minimal objective, because once you do that, there's a noose being tightened around all of the Russian forces in the Kherson area, and that's going to start freaking out the Russians heavily, and they're going to have to figure out how to react to that. So I would say that would be the minimum goal. I would say the midway goal in between the best outcome and the worst outcome would be taking Melitopol and dividing the Russian front line completely in two. That would most likely be the midway goal, and then the best situation in this offensive would be that they reach all the way to Crimea and take the Chonhar Gap, or even start moving around towards Armyansk. If they were able to cut off Crimea and the Kherson Oblast completely from each other and split the front lines in two, we would pretty much be watching what would have happened to the Confederate States of America near the end of the Civil War, when the Union started to pretty much chop up the Confederacy into multiple pieces. That would pretty much be what you were seeing. And in the Civil War, that was the death knell for the Confederates. That pretty much meant their nation would die within months after that started to happen in mass. And for the Russians, that means that their war effort would most likely start to die off in mass as well, because at that point their front lines are so shattered, their forces are being destroyed or captured in droves, to the point that they really don't have an operational, coherent, standing army that could stand up against the Ukrainians. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and also give a little bit of historical precedent to a similar situation. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rocky Huerta, who says, question, do you think the war criminals will be sentenced or executed?
I have a feeling that due to how the war has been unfolding, the Ukrainians won't really be able to bring a lot of these folks to justice. They'll have to end up trying to find out where they are and blast them. And that's pretty much how it's going to be. Because a lot of people are always talking about, capture him and bring him to The Hague. But it's not that simple. Because if the Russians continue to survive after this war, that will never happen. And so your best bet is, is to find that missile commander that ordered those Tashkas to be fired, and then have him blown up in a Tu-141 attack or a drone attack, and that would probably be the best way to hold those war criminals accountable, at least on a very mass-produced, quick and easy way to make sure that all of them pay for their crimes, is to make sure to pay about $30 to send a grenade flying their way. And so with that, I hope that does address that one fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Epic Trains Canada, who says, what will happen to Belarus if Dukashenko passes away? Will Putin replace him with some loyal to himself, or will there be a revolution?
There may be a revolution in Belarus, but I have a feeling it will probably be quashed, because while the Belarusian military isn't really made for any external conflicts outside of their borders, the Belarusian military is pretty much a paramilitary police force meant to put down the population of Belarus with an iron fist. And so it will most likely be that someone from inside of that paramilitary force in Belarus will probably start to rise the ranks and become the next leader of Belarus. He'll probably also want to try and keep into close ties with Russia, because considering that they're their ally right now, and they can continue to kind of be a baby to Russia, where Russia supports them and kind of, subsidizes a little bit of their existence, they would probably want to move in that direction. So I have a feeling that is most likely the way Lukashenko dying would go in Belarus, but there's an equal chance that that revolution could happen. And now that Lukashenko's dead and his upper cronies are most likely infighting with each other to see who will become the leader, the paramilitary force in Belarus could pretty much just side with the populace, and then end up running those guys out of the country, or putting them into obscurity, or putting them underground, 6 feet under, and then finding out how to actually have a democratic election, kind of like Czechoslovakia would do during the dissolution of the Soviet Union, or Poland would do once Solidarity pretty much took complete control of Poland in the late 80s and very early 90s. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and also give a little bit of historical precedent to similar situations like that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question. I don't know why I was confused about that, but we have one from Stefan Fisher, and we have 3 more questions, by the way. Stefan says, do you know if when the F-16s get there, are they going to give them the AIM-260?
The AIM-260, let me make sure I know which one that is, the AIM-260. The JATM, the Joint Advanced Tactical Missile. I wouldn't know. When was this thing produced? Let's see. Oh, no, they would not send it over, considering that this is brand new. And apparently this is why I've never heard about it, because it's not even really in service yet. But it's expected to replace the AMRAAM, or I believe it's Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile. And let me see if that's what it stands. Yeah, I actually got that right. Thank God. Yeah, I always have to try and say that stuff and then check it. So that way, I'm making sure I get the stuff right and remember it. But it appears they'll be replacing the AMRAAM. And considering that the AMRAAM is what's being replaced, I would expect that the AIM-120 AMRAAMs would be sent over. But we would probably never see the JTAMs or the AIM-260s being sent over yet, considering that they are brand new. And that's most likely going to be a national security risk. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, I think we're on to the second to last question of the night.
Yes, and this one goes to Jethro Bradley, who says, Enforcer, do you think Prigozhin has or had a mole or connection in one of the Russian legions? He seemed to be the first to suggest there might be raids into Belgorod months back.
He may have, and we know that, at least from classified documents that came out from Thug Shaker Central, that Prigozhin had actually offered, and it's always funny to say that so seriously because it's such a stupid name, but we know that he actually had some communications with the Ukrainian government and was offering them to give away Russian positions around Bakhmut in exchange for something. I forgot what the exchange was, but he did offer that before, so we know that he does have contact with the Ukrainian government, and he may have also gotten some information about what was happening, what was going to happen to Russia, and that may have been why he was hinting at that, to try and look like he's on top of things, on top of the ball, when he's really just getting information from the Ukrainians. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to ask the lucky last question of the $1 Million Night?
And that viewer is Don Lupnitz. Don. And he says, what if the Ukraine army went through Russia from the north and then turned back into the Donbass and bypassed their defenses?
We actually had that question last night, I believe. Or a couple of nights before. Some questions seem to like be getting cloned, and I'm not saying that you're copying Matthew. It's like some people are asking like similar questions, but to answer that question, that would be okay thing to do, but even if they move north into Russia and then back south, they're still going to run into those old defunct defensive lines in the northern part of the LPR. So it really just make more sense for them to push through Ukrainian territory and then down towards Luhansk, because it's a shorter route. They'll mostly incur less casualties, and they're also regaining all of their territory instead of expending efforts in Russia, taking ground that they wouldn't really need to take. And it would also be escalating the war a little bit further than what the Russian Liberation Army is doing in Belgorod right now. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And that's the famous catchphrase, hope that does address that fairly well, is well known by all of y'all. And we've reached the end of tonight's stream. It is finally the end of 2 hours and 41 minutes of history being made on this channel. History being made all over YouTube right now. And y'all were a part of it. And it's unbelievable to think that y'all were. It's unbelievable to think that we were running the stream when that happened. We passed $1 million tonight. We're now probably at, and let me look, probably around $1,010,000 raised in support of Ukraine right now. $1,010,000 already. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for making that possible. It is amazing to think that every single one of y'all has contributed in the massive ways that y'all have to make these fundraisers possible, to help this channel to keep on running, and to keep attention and to keep support going for Ukraine. It means a lot to me because we've been doing this for 466 days. I know it means a lot to Matthew. It means a lot to both of us because we've both been committed to this since the very start of the war for 466 days. And it is unbelievable to think that we've finally been able to make it to this point that it seems so far away for so long. Even right now, it seems impossible that we would have actually been able to reach that goal. And yet here we are, and we have passed it. The Lee Spring Army will forever remain in YouTube history one of the greatest communities that ever existed. Whether it be for just another few months and the Ukrainians are able to round out this war in an amazing fashion with amazing victories, or whether this war goes on for another year or two, the LSA has cemented itself as one of the most amazing communities on YouTube. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure tonight. If y'all did enjoy and this is your first time watching this stream, make sure to subscribe. It makes us incredibly happy to know that people do enjoy this channel and what we've been able to do and what our community has been able to do, that they would be willing to subscribe and follow us along throughout this war as we continue on doing what we do, and the LSA continue on doing the amazing and unbelievable things that they've been able to do. And I hope that y'all join them and become a part of them. If you also enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button. We've gotten up to 3,080 likes right now at only 2 hours and 43 minutes in, which is pretty high. And if y'all do hit the like button, it actually helps to promote this channel's videos out to more people. And those people may be able to support the fundraisers, may be able to help us to even get closer to $2 million in the future. And it also, on top of that, another thing that y'all could do to help out this channel, if y'all would like, is that once this stream ends and it becomes a video, go into the comments section, kind of like a normal YouTube video, and then just leave a comment down there. Because that also helps out a great deal whenever people interact with videos, whether it be a like or a comment. It helps out massively in pushing them through the algorithms and sharing with more people what y'all have been able to do and what this channel does to cover the news of this war. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Thank you for making this night the most amazing and special night of this channel's history. And thank you all once again for being the Lee Spring Army. With that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And thank you all, LSA, for this historic night. We've raised $1 million. Long live the LSA and Slava Ukraine.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.